Leon, following night bath, rode out to the villages of Lanka and Pleton in search of gravediggers. Just as he'd learned earlier, Lanka was a quiet settlement nestled near the woods, peaceful, serene, but marred by the foul stench from the leather workers' yards. He made a mental note to warn Lohak never to build downwind should he settle there in the future. Pleton, on the other hand, bustled near the town road. Merchants crowded its entrance with stalls, and a small trade post with horse-drawn carriages kept goods flowing in and out. With Baff's assistance, Leon recruited over 70 workers from both villages. He also secured the help of Pleton's elderly village official, sending him to town with a deposit to order a mass of wooden coffins. They returned to Selva before sunset. By the next morning, the hired laborers arrived right on time. Together with the remaining able villagers, they began excavating graves in the secluded woodland beyond the village. While Azirian continued to recover from his wounds, Leon assigned Olivia to organize a group to identify the dead and mark their graves. With tombstones out of reach, the names were carved on as simple wooden planks, temporary, yet necessary for grieving families to find their kin. With the influx of manpower, the work progressed rapidly. Within just a few days, the burial grounds were ready. The coffins, ordered from the town, began arriving in batches, and by the end of the week, the dead were laid to rest according to their family lines. With his duties complete, Baff departed Selva, his role fulfilled. The very day after the laborers were paid and sent home, a young lookout from the windmill rushed into the village with urgent news. The men had returned. Led by village official Talk, the young and able-bodied militiamen marched back over the hills. They had heard rumors at the fortress, but they didn't know the fates of their families. As they entered the village, the unnatural quiet stirred unease. Their strides quickened. Then they saw them. Wives, children, the elderly, gathered in the market square. Tears flowed. Families reunited in a wave of relief and sorrow. Husbands embraced wives. Fathers clung to children. But not all were so lucky. Some wandered through the crowd, searching desperately for familiar faces that would never return. Their calls echoed unanswered, transforming into anguished wails as the truth sank in. Later, in the cemetery, sobbing men collapsed before the graves of loved ones. They hadn't even seen the bodies, only the earth and wood that now separated them. Yet that same earth, in its silence, had preserved dignity the chaos of death would not. Among the mourners, Talk wept before his parents' graves. But his second son's was nowhere to be found. With his eldest son at his side, Talk asked around for Boris, only to be met with contempt and scorn. Some spat at the ground in disgust. Only Brian the blacksmith answered him, recounting what Boris had done. "How did I raise something worse than a beast?" Talk's voice trembled. He had no tears left, that his son had abandoned the village, knowing the attack was coming. After all he'd done for him, was a pain that struck deeper than grief. Brian offered a small mercy. "The new lord will judge Boris in front of everyone. If you cannot bear it, you needn't attend." But Talk shook his head. Whatever Boris had become, he was still his son. He had to witness the end. Upstairs in the newly cleaned townhouse, Leon watched Talk depart Brian's home, walking away with a hollow expression. He had expected the man to come and plead for mercy. He was, after all, a father. But he didn't. One less argument Leon had to deflect. Boris's crimes, by law or by honor, left no room for forgiveness. Leon turned his attention back to the table, dipping his quill into a near-empty inkwell. The pen was crude and worn, the paper rough, but it was all he had. He was drafting a code of law, rudimentary, but his own. Fairer characters were too limited for what he wanted, so he wrote in the language of his old world. Only he could understand it, but that was enough for now. There was a knock. "Big brother, lunch is ready," Lena called. "Bring it in," Leon replied, not looking up. She entered, glanced at his writing, and asked with wide-eyed wonder, "You're making magic symbols?" Leon chuckled. "Just a code of conduct. Rules for the future." "What kind of rules?" "Laws. What's allowed, what isn't. What gets punished?" Lena nodded, only half understanding. Leon didn't mind. He barely understood it himself, just enough to know this lawless land needed structure. Unlike the Holy Sun Church in Syrian, which taught the law in every village, Orland had no such thing. Here, justice was what the Lord said it was. And that, Leon knew, was a dangerous path. If he ever ruled more than just Selva, he'd need something stronger than whim to keep order. The very next day, the village gathered once more in a market square. 3 ornate chairs stood before the village hall. Leon and his companions, Lohak and Azirian, appeared in polished armor, walking through the crowd with authority. They were young, yes, but they were knights now. They had to look the part. Leon stepped forward. "I am Leon Pendragon. My companions and I are your new lords, knighted by Lord Alifer Ferolis. From today onward, our word is law in Selva." There were murmurs, but few were surprised. "I've called you here," Leon continued, "not just to meet, but to pass judgment." At a signal, 2 guards dragged Boris into the square. Gone was the cocky thug. He was a broken shell, barely able to stand. Leon listed his crimes, voice unwavering. First, attempted robbery of a knight. Second, using drugs to commit burglary. Third, and most damning, deliberately withholding knowledge of the attack that slaughtered your people. The crowd erupted. Families of the dead surged forward, screaming. Some tried to reach Boris. Leon slammed his gauntlet fist onto the chair's armrest. Enough! Even Lohak stood and roared over the chaos, his voice unexpectedly thunderous. The villagers stilled. Leon resumed. "There are witnesses to your crimes. Do you deny them?" Boris whimpered, begged, and then, seeing there was no escape, snapped. With madness in his eyes, he screamed curses at everyone. At Leon, at the villagers, at the world. He called for death, his and theirs. Leon stared in silence, then finally sighed. There would be no orderly trial. Not here, not yet, but there would be justice. One way or another. As the villagers gathered in the square, Leon stood before them with calm authority. The trial had reached its final moments. He turned to the crowd. "Does anyone wish to offer a final defense for the accused?" His gaze swept the faces of the villagers, most twisted with anger. There were no raised hands, no voices stepping forward. Only one figure moved, Talk, Boris's father, quietly turning his back and walking away into the crowd. In place of defense came the familiar cries of the mob. "Hang him! Beat him to death!" There would be no appeals today. Boris, the infamous village thug, had always been despised. Now, with his crimes laid bare, he was utterly forsaken. Leon thought back to his previous life, where even the vilest criminals were granted legal defense. The charge of treason, or aiding an enemy attack, could never be upheld in a modern court based on inference alone. Had someone defended Boris, they might have argued he fled in fear, unaware of the time to warn others. Maybe even claimed that traveling to town to report to the Lord proved he didn't intend harm. But this was not that world, and this was not that time. Leon finally understood why advocates and defense attorneys were essential in any civilized society. Even a villain deserves a voice, if only to uphold the line between justice and vengeance. But here, in this chaotic, grief-stricken village, the court was little more than a public square, the crowd as judge and executioner. Leon sighed. The accused has confessed to his crimes and shown no remorse. The evidence of robbery is conclusive and the charges are upheld. As for the charge of treason, letting the enemy attack without warning, while deeply suspicious, it lacks sufficient proof. No sentence will be passed on that count. The words fell like stones into a boiling sea. He beckoned a young page, who stepped forward carrying a worn booklet, rough paper, and a pot of ink. Leon took them, dipped his quill, and wrote in brief. December 9th, 672 Orland calendar. Name, Boris. Crime, multiple counts of robbery. Sentence, death by hanging, immediate execution. Remaining property to be confiscated and redistributed to orphans of the deceased. It was short, but official, his first judgment as Lord of Selva. The seal Sir Baff had promised was still being crafted. For now, the document would remain unsigned, but its authority was no less real. Boris was dragged away by young villagers as the crowd jeered and spit. Then Leon turned to the other issue at hand. I must inform you of another matter. While you were away, a knight from Canadar was taken prisoner during the battle. The remaining villagers voted to ransom him. However, now that you have returned, the final decision lies with all of you. You have 1 day to make your choice, ransom or execution. Notify Blacksmith Brian with your vote before sunset tomorrow. With that, Leon left the square. He had more pressing concerns now. Lohak's sister. Though the stoic youth never voiced his worries, Leon could see the strain in his eyes each day. They had a lead now, a chance, however slim, that she might still be alive in Canadar's western port. Once Azirian was fully healed, they would depart. But the road ahead was treacherous. They would need to cross the entire enemy kingdom. And only Azirian spoke Uriah with any fluency. Leon and Lohak practiced daily, but progress was slow. That afternoon, none of the three stayed to witness Boris's execution. Back home, they stored the official document and called the house servants to help remove their armor. Once the burden of steel was lifted, the weight on their shoulders felt a bit lighter. Just as Leon sat to resume his Uriah lessons, a servant approached. "My lord, someone requests an audience." Leon descended to the freshly clean hall. Seated in his tall chair, he watched as Talk entered, knelt, and bowed his head. "My lord Leon, I come to resign from my position as village official and beg your permission for my son and I to leave Selva." Leon leaned back. "Do you object to the verdict?" "I dare not," Talk replied quietly. "Your ruling was fair, kinder than I deserved. But my parents are dead, and my second son. He shamed us all. I cannot sleep in this village without nightmares. Nor can I allow my surviving son to grow up under the shadow of his brother's name." Leon nodded solemnly. "In my homeland, we say, when a child fails, the parents are not without blame. Though your reputation here is good, you bear some responsibility. You may leave, but as migration tax, your home and land are forfeit. They will be sold, and the proceeds given to the widows of the victims." Talk bowed deeply once more. "Thank you, my lord." As the man left, Leon reflected. 2 fewer villagers. But Selva had more land than people now. They would recover in time. And Leon already had a new village official in mind, Brian the blacksmith. A respected elder, literate, and calm under pressure. He was perfect. The next evening, Brian returned with the villagers' decision. 130 votes for ransom, 9 for execution, he reported. Only Talk and his son abstained. Leon accepted the record. "Good. Talk has left. He will not receive a share of the ransom." Then he looked Brian in the eye. "Uncle, I would like you to become Selva's next village official. Winter crops must be salvaged. The people will need your guidance." Brian hesitated. The young lord's decision caught him off guard. He had been planning to leave, but not anymore. Perhaps Selva still had a future. As Brian silently nodded, Leon continued, "One more thing. Do you know any reliable couriers who could deliver a letter to the southern coast of Canadar?" Brian furrowed his brow. "There are messengers in the Baron's town, but with war in the east, they won't accept commissions now. You need to go west to Buenaraz County. A trade city, there still does business with Canadar. The merchant guild may help, but it'll be expensive." Leon blinked. "Wait, there's still trade with Canadar? I thought we were at war." Brian stroked his beard. "That's Eastern politics. The Western lords have their own interests. Unless the king mobilizes the entire realm, the Western front stays quiet. Trade continues quietly." Leon narrowed his eyes. "You know a lot for a village blacksmith." Brian chuckled dryly. "I was young once. Dreamed of the army. Took a wound, came home. Heard a lot of things along the way." Leon didn't push further. "Not now. But this news changed everything. If the western border was peaceful, they might be able to pass through openly. A safe route, if such a thing existed in wartime." Leon stood suddenly, energized by the hope. He had to tell Lohak. They had a lead. They had a path. And somewhere in the west, a girl might still be alive. No matter the risk, they would find her.
Hey, welcome to Firescale Audiobooks. If you enjoy our audiobooks, please consider subscribing to the channel. Also, feel free to share your review in the comments section below.
The days flew by. The candlelight flickered, and in the dim cellar, Olivia held her breath and covered her mouth and nose, holding a long sword and standing quietly behind Manuel. The night prisoner, whose feet were bound by heavy iron chains, could only lie on the ground and write. Only his hands were free at this moment. With the help of the candle held by Rohak and the light cast by the cellar hole, Mamar, who looked haggard and dirty, picked up a quill and wrote in his own handwriting on the letter paper to tell his family about the situation of being defeated and imprisoned. Soon, 3 letters with exactly the same content were written. Azarian pinched his nose and picked it up, examining each one carefully. After repeated confirmation, in addition to simply informing his family that he was safe and urging him to raise the ransom, the letter also clearly stated the ransom delivery time, location, and transaction method as required. In fact, in the conflicts and wars between the northern and southern kingdoms over the years, there have been countless examples of such ransoms and trade of prisoners of war, and complete procedures and practices have long been in place. As long as they were not killed on the battlefield, in most cases the victor would not execute valuable noble captives, and if the nobles who died in battle were of high enough status, their families would even try to pay a certain amount of money in exchange for the bodies to be buried. When it comes to whether he can return to his hometown again, Mammal will not play any tricks. "How is it?" Leon asked, enduring the particularly unpleasant smell. "No problem." Azarian finished reading the letter, translated the content into Faru, and read it quickly to his friends. Leon confirmed again and again that it was correct. Before leaving, he frowned and looked at the prisoners of war for the last time. "Do you only know so much about the Falcon family? How much do you expect me, a knight from Shannon, to know about the western coast?" Mamma replied in a hoarse voice. He felt speechless and licked his dry lips. "I'm a martial artist, not a nerd. If I hadn't followed the Baron to the north over the years, the heraldry officer wouldn't have introduced me to the coat of arms of the Falcon family." Leon listened to his feeble answer and put away the letter helplessly. Mammal could recognize that the white bird crest belonged to the great nobles who ruled the western port of Canadar. But unfortunately, his understanding of it was limited to knowing that Earl Falcon was a great nobleman who had a close relationship with King Aviat, and the city called Western Port under his rule was extremely wealthy. "I don't know anything else." According to Mammal's confession, Baron Duzin had no contact with the nobles in the West, and he was just a knight in the inner palace who only charged and killed the enemy. So how could he know about the affairs of nobles thousands of miles away? Unable to get any more information, Leon put away the letter. Roark walked to Mamel and roughly locked his hands with shackles again. Everyone quickly climbed up the wooden ladder one by one and left the smelly cellar. After walking out of the warehouse where the prisoners of war were kept, the 3 Leon men immediately leaned on the wall and spitted. At this time, they didn't even bother to pay attention to the knightly etiquette mentioned by Lord Balf. "Sorry, if I had known better, I wouldn't have asked you to go down and help." Leon breathed in the fresh air and looked apologetically at the girl who also had a bitter look on her face. "No, it doesn't matter," Olivia reluctantly said with a pale expression. "I come every now and then to deliver food and water, so I'm mentally prepared. But obviously, there is a huge difference between standing on it and hanging things in a basket and going down to the smelly cellar in person." It took a long time for everyone to recover from the nausea. There was no way. Right now, the prisoner in the cellar was safe. Otherwise, with the opponent's martial arts, even in a weak state, he would still be in danger, and Olivia would not be able to watch him doing nothing day and night. After returning home, Leon went upstairs and sealed the 3 letters written by the captives one by one, dripped the paint on them, and then used his own signet ring seized from Mammal's luggage to stamp his personal coat of arms on the seal. The reason why the prisoners of war were asked to write 3 letters was because of the multiple insurances suggested by Azarian. In this era, long-distance letter delivery is prone to accidents, and there is no guarantee that it will reach its destination. Writing multiple important letters and delivering them via different routes can ensure that at least one letter reaches the destination as much as possible. Sitting quietly and watching Leon working on the table, Olivia took the wooden cup brought by little Lena. "Thank you." She turned to Lena and smiled gently. However, the warmth coming from the wall of the wooden cup in her hand surprised Olivia. She lowered her head and looked at the mouth of the cup. The clear and transparent color was obviously water, not ale. Holding the cup, the girl took a small sip with her lips. The taste of still warm hot water in her mouth made her feel strange. Very unaccustomed. Lena looked at Sister Olivia's strange expression, so she quietly leaned in her ear and whispered in her ear to explain, "Brother Leon taught us to boil water in a pot before drinking it." "It's very strange." Olivia thought for a moment and whispered, "Maybe it's to teach you how to make tea in the future." She had heard from her father that some wealthy nobles liked a high-end drink called tea, which was a fine leaf-like plant from distant Cerular that needed to be brewed with hot water. "That's not true." Leon packed the envelope and raised his head to explain. "In our Sarion, the Church of the Holy Sun advocates boiling water. The priests say that water purified by flames is cleaner and will cause fewer diseases when drank. Although ordinary people, except for wealthy families, cannot afford to burn fuel like this every day, we will try our best to boil water for drinking on every festival." This is not his excuse, but the truth of Syrian in the original owner's memory. The Holy Sun Church does believe that fire can purify ordinary water, which may be related to their worship of the sun and fire. You could try it too. I think drinking hot water can really prevent illness. If you think it's too expensive to burn coal, you can come to my place every day to make some boiled water to drink. It doesn't matter. Leon picked up the hot water that Lena put on the table and moistened his throat comfortably. In any case, if he has rich conditions like now, Leon still likes this ancient custom of Syrian. It's okay to drink raw water on the way to escape. Now that he is a lord, he can afford the coal money to boil some water. Health and safety are not trivial matters. In this era, Leon doesn't want to die from an inexplicable plague instead of dying under the enemy's knife. Well, it sounds reasonable. I will boil more water to try it in the future. After learning about this interesting exotic custom, Olivia nodded as if she understood it, although she had never been sick since she was a child. "Are you going to the western port of Canada in the next few days?" The girl took the wooden cup and took another sip of hot water. "I don't know if it's a psychological effect." After listening to Leon's words about fire purification, she got used to the taste and flavor of the hot water. It's easy to understand. Just like food needs to be cooked with fire, maybe water is the same. Olivia couldn't help thinking. In the past, the villagers, regardless of gender, age, really avoided drinking water as much as possible when they could drink beer. Perhaps it was because it was not cooked with fire. Azirian's injury is almost healed. If I don't leave for the western port as soon as possible, I'm afraid that the night will be long and dreams will be many. Leon put down the wooden cup and sighed. It's just that I have to trouble him to continue to accompany me and Lohak to take risks. It's really a bit sorry. I have received the kindness of that kind lady. Now I have the ability. It is not reasonable to sit idly by and watch her whereabouts unknown, but Azirian actually has nothing to do with that lady. I think he has such a close relationship with you that he won't think that the safety of Lohak's sister has nothing to do with him. Olivia turned the cup. Yes, that kid will definitely say proudly that the descendants of the Flairel family will never ignore their friends. Leon smiled and nodded unconsciously. Although he had gone through many hardships to cross over to this world, he could not get friends like Azirian and Lohak who were willing to stick their necks out for each other in his previous life. I'm afraid it will be very dangerous this time. After all, it's in the territory of Cantarter. Although your father said that the West may still be trading, no one can tell the specific situation. Leon nodded. How about it? The girl tapped the wooden cup with her fingertips, looked at Leon with some expectation, and suggested, "Take me with you. You see, I'm so good at fighting, I can definitely help you a lot on the road." Leon raised his eyes and looked at the girl's eyes that suddenly sparkled, and he seemed to see the faint excitement in them. This suggestion is very tempting. With Olivia's martial arts that can still handle the siege of two fully armed and powerful knights of the Order of Arms with ease, if she accompanies them, will the safety of this trip be greatly increased? Leon shook his head helplessly at her. Forget the Baron of Cantadar who coveted you? don't really think that your little face is not attractive to other men? What if you are taken with you, and you are favored by the nobles of Canada again? Hearing such a straightforward statement, Olivia lowered her head in embarrassment. Judging from the eager reaction of the boys in the village to her since childhood, the girl is not unaware of her appearance. But later, after picking up a wooden stick and showing her fierce side in front of the group of increasingly excessive bastards, she has also adapted to the attitude of fear rather than pursuit by the boys in the village in the past few years. Although the nickname of Golden Lion is unpleasant, it has also saved herself a lot of trouble. However, this martial arts can scare the young people in the village, but it certainly cannot scare off the noble masters from the outside world. If, as Leon said, such an embarrassing pursuit really happened after leaving the village, it would undoubtedly be a big trouble that would be difficult to deal with. I appreciate your kindness, but if you follow us, we will not know how many troubles will arise just by chasing flies for you on the road. Leon declined the girl's kindness. Olivia thought about it, raised her arm, and raised her sleeve with the other hand to cover her face. How about this? Cover your face, tie your hair in a hat, and I can put on a robe and pretend to be a boy. Have you heard too many strange stories? Hearing her proposal, Leon couldn't help laughing. Disguising as a man and masking to play a boy is a good way. However, the above reasons are not the real reason why he declined the girl. Leon knew, without thinking, that Brian the blacksmith would never allow Olivia to go to Canada with him to take risks. Folding his arms, he could only persuade the girl. Olivia, you are different. The three of us are now alone and free of worries. We can go through fire and water freely. Even if we die in an accident, no one will cry for us. If you are alone, I will definitely not refuse your joining. But you still have your father to take care of. Your martial arts may be able to protect the three of us, but the three of us cannot promise Uncle Brian that we will protect you. Do you understand what I mean? After hearing this, the girl's expression became visibly lost. But Olivia also understood the difficulty in Leon's words, so she had to let go of this sudden impulse. Leon stood up, stepped forward, and patted the girl on the shoulder, comforting, I know you want to help us, and you also want to get out of Selva and see the outside world. Believe me, this will definitely happen in the future, but not now. Why don't you train the martial arts of us in the past 2 days before we set off? I heard that Rohak will come to you for sparring whenever he is free these days. Hearing Leon change the topic, Olivia cheered up, nodded, and replied, Rohak said that he always has nightmares and insomnia, so he has to practice martial arts every day until he's exhausted before he can sleep. However, his strength seems to be strong these days. It's gotten bigger, and it's a lot better than before. He is more diligent than me. Leon sat back at his desk and picked up the rough papers on the table. It records the approximate data of cultivated land, pasture land, homeland, forest land, public land, population, livestock, craftsmen, etc. in the 3 places of Selva, Lanka, and Pleaton that he has personally measured and investigated these days. It's not accurate, but it can calculate the territory output relatively intuitively. Excluding daily grain storage, seed saving, and grain collection and taxes before the previous war, the 3 territories will be able to barely make ends meet in the coming year and will not be able to save much income. If they want to develop, they will have to wait until the war is over. It happened that the young men from the other 2 places were unable to return home from the border fortress in a short period of time, and Selva had just suffered a disaster. Before these winter crops were harvested, he was unable to do more things that required human and financial resources to develop the territory. In other words, during this period, the territory was in the same state with and without the 3 of them. Leon put down his documents and looked at Olivia, who was sitting on a chair with a sword on her waist. Yes, we really need your help. After hearing that she could help her friend, the girl became energetic again and asked curiously, What do you need me to do? After we leave, although Selva's affairs are entrusted to your father to help manage, if there is any unexpected situation with Lanka and Pleaton, you can also help me look after it. Before we leave, we will go back and communicate with the 2 places. The village official informed me. In addition, I will keep some of the gold coins in the box under your bed for emergency use in the territory, as well as the weapons and armor in the warehouse. If an accident happens again, you have the right to allocate these resources. Remember, these things are yours to use. Blending, not Uncle Brian. As he spoke, Leon touched his chin and reminded the girl uneasily. Nowadays, many men have lost their wives and children, and some women have lost their husbands. If someone wants to reorganize a family in the village after a while, remember to pay attention to them. Whether it's your wish or not, I won't allow any force. If you find that there is a conflict in the village, you have the ability and authority to intervene on my behalf to stop it. In the worst-case scenario, you can forcefully capture the thugs on our behalf. It can take as little as a month or more, I don't know, but it's my entrustment, Leon said as he took a piece of paper and wrote down the actual appointment document. It's not just Selva who's written, but Lanka and Platon too. Opening the drawer, he found the small seal of the sword-wing coat of arms from the seal sent by Nightbalf in the past 2 days and stamped it on his signature. All that's left is for Loark and Azirian to sign and seal it tomorrow. Standing up, Leon said solemnly to the surprised Olivia, "Olivia, you are now officially appointed as our agent. You have the right to use our seal. You must maintain it before we come back. The order of the territory." Before leaving, I took Olivia to Lanka and Plydon and informed the village officials of the 2 places of the agency for emergency affairs. Finally, the day of departure arrived. Leon got up early, and while washing, he did not forget to remind Lena to help pack the items for the trip. This time, he was not escaping, and he would prepare all the travel equipment before departure. Towel, toothbrush, tooth powder, and daily cleaning supplies were all available. After drying his face and throwing the towel into the water, Leon looked up from the wooden basin, but saw little Lena staring at his head with curious eyes. "What's wrong?" Leon touched his hair. "Is there something on my head?" Lena shook her head. "No, brother Leon, I just think your hair color is very special." "Special?" Leon raised his hand and pulled a strand of bangs straight, lowered his head, and glanced at it. It was still the original owner's brown hair. Very ordinary? "No, you can't see it yourself." Lena raised her hand to lift her hair and pointed at the root of her hair. "I just noticed recently that the color of your hair here is different." "Really?" Leon asked her to get a small bronze mirror and then pressed her bangs to her head to expose her forehead. It was true. The hair color was about 2 centimeters from the root of the brown hair, and it was like a gradual transition, showing a completely dark black color, which looked like it was dyed, but it was covered by the hair on the head. Leon put down his hair, picked up a wooden comb, and shaved it, but didn't care. Maybe it was a physical problem of the original owner, or maybe it was some genetic characteristic of the race in this world. Who knows? Now, there is no way to take a taxi to the tertiary hospital to see a doctor. After leaving the bedroom on the 2nd floor, Lohak and Azirian in the 2 guest rooms next door had also gotten up and sounded like they were dressing up. Leon went down first and put on the chainmail and leather-lined armor he had prepared in advance, and then covered himself with arm armor and shin armor to protect his shoulders, arms, and calves. Putting on a large hooded cloak to protect against wind and rain, he looked down at his simple outfit. He felt like he had changed from a knight to a demon hunter. If it wasn't difficult to draw the sword with a long sword on his back, he really wanted to cost Jyoti. Yes, for the 3 of them at present, it is obviously irrational to wear a full set of knight plate armor all the time during long journeys. Even if the horsepower of the Uriah, noble warhorse in this world, is extremely strong, enough to support the long-distance travel of a fully armored knight, but unfortunately, the physical strength of the 3 teenagers is not enough to support the fatigue of wearing armor day and night. The baggage has limited weight, so Leon will only bring the luxurious armor of Baron Canadar and the black battle robe that he hates. This is for Azirian to wear when something unexpected happens in Canadar, and pull the big flag of Baron Dosen to scare people. The remaining 2 sets of knight plate armor could only be placed in the territory and given to Olivia for safekeeping. After putting on his sword, Leon went to the backyard and asked Hawk to lead the horses out. There were 4 horses in total. In addition to the 3 war horses, They also brought an ordinary pack horse for carrying bags and fodder. After Lohak and Azirian put on their scattered armor like demon hunters, the three of them mounted their war horses and walked out of the village. They got up very early, but in fact the tenants in the village got up even earlier, came to the entrance of the village and looked at the fields. Every household, regardless of men, women, old or young, went to the fields early, and people tried their best to fill the labor shortage. Leon glanced and saw that Olivia seemed to have seen them. The girl who was working with her sleeves rolled up, straightened up, and waved to herself in the wheat field. Leon also waved to the girl as a simple farewell. Crossing the hillside, the three of them and 4 horses trotted on the dirt road leading to the town. Turning west at the first fork in the road, passing through the woodland and the valley, the view suddenly opened up. The sky was blue and the clouds were white. The grass hills were undulating. The sun was shining on the vast plains, and a few lines of birds flew across the sky, a scene of ease and contentment. There were no enemy soldiers to hide from, and no beasts to chase them. On the winding road, riding the horse, sometimes trotting for a while, sometimes strolling, walking and stopping, Leon even yawned a little on the shaking and bumpy horseback. No matter how many topics there are with the companions, there is always a time when they run out of things to talk about. They can't find anything to talk about, so they fell silent and concentrated on their journey. With the blessing of the BMW under their crotch, they only took half a day to reach the base camp of the Thornflower family. The town was named Ferolus on the map. It is not known whether the ancestors of the Thornflower family named the town after their own surnames, or whether they named their family after the town. There is also an outer town area similar to the castle town built later outside Ferolus. It is said that the population of the whole city is nearly 10,000. Although it is not as big as the holy city of Rolander, the hometown of the original owner, such a scale is not small in this era, not to mention that the population of the villages in the barony is far greater than that of the towns. Walking through this low-rise building complex, we came to the solid city wall about 8 or 9 meters high. The guards guarding the city gate stopped everyone and collected tolls from them according to the regulations of the territory. Leon had to take out the leather bucket where the documents were stored and showed the guards the canonization documents representing his and others' knighthood. The captain of the guards unfolded the luxurious parchment and carefully checked the seal of the Lord. He then looked at these young boys with disbelief and quickly bowed to apologize. The 3 did not get entangled and urged their horses to walk into the city while the soldiers bowed their heads and bowed. The nobles had many privileges. If commoners entered the city, they not only had to pay money, but also had to get off the horse and walk, but knights naturally did not have so many restrictions. However, there were many residents in Ferorus, and many roads were not wide. Many buildings in the city were newly built, which squeezed the already limited space. Especially when passing by a crowded market, they could only dismount to speed up the passing efficiency. The bustling market was full of noisy shouts from vendors, shouts from children playing, and all kinds of quarrels and laughter. But at the same time, all kinds of strange smells lingered in the environment. There was the fishy smell of livestock and poultry, the sweat and body odor of people, and all kinds of indescribable smells. Turning one hidden corner after another, Leon selectively ignored those indescribable things with suspicious shapes and tried to hypnotize himself to look straight ahead. It seemed as if he had returned to the memory of experiencing the public toilets in the imperial capital more than 10 years ago. In contrast to the environment of this town, the village of Selva, which was full of rural smell, smelled 10,000 times fresher. At least the open environment in the countryside would allow these smells to drift away with the wind. He was not surprised by what he saw and heard. Even his own country had spent more than 10 years to rectify the urban environment. At present, this feudal town was obviously incapable of managing public health. Leon left the crowded market, followed the road in the town to the upper city near the castle, and his nose gradually became better. I don't know if he has adapted or the air is really fresher. Slowing down a little, Leon looked up at the end of the road leading to the distant highlands. the Lord's castle, with towering walls far away from the residential area, and a trace of envy flashed in his eyes. Regardless of whether it is comfortable or not, this towering and majestic fortress looks magnificent. Leon, naturally, also longs to own such a solid fortress. Unfortunately, this thing is really not affordable for a poor knight like himself. Without visiting the feudal lord's castle, Leon has learned from the letter sent by Lord Bath a while ago that Baron Oliver led his army across the Valley County again to support the war in Maymere County and is not in the city at the moment. Going around the road, before leaving Ferrolis through the gate on the other side, Leon asked passers-by and found a tavern in the upper city with a stable. Several people dismounted and prepared to have lunch before leaving. Taking off the hood of the cloak, Leon and the other two walked into the house, found a corner to sit down, paid for the horse feed, and ordered drinks and food. He never drank in his previous life, but now he is used to drinking beer. There is no way he can't be hypocritical and ask every store to boil water for him on the journey. As for the raw water provided by the store, Leon couldn't imagine how dirty the water source in this crowded town was. He couldn't help drinking. Fortunately, the alcohol content of the alcohol in this era was very low. The poet, leaning against the wall, plucked the strings and hummed a sad rhythm. The shadow of war. The earth is empty. The people suffered, and despair was rampant. Famine lurked like a thief in the night, leaving only the footsteps of death and destruction. Famine? The barony is a good year this year. The Lord just beat up the Canadar. If there is a famine, it should be a famine for the Southerners. Change a song, change a song. The loud-voiced guest who paid for the song interrupted the poet's chant. Amen. The poet cleared his throat and changed to a song praising the brave. After hearing the satisfying poem, the loud-voiced merchant turned to look at his drinking buddy. I'm telling you, I'm not talking nonsense. I saw it with my own eyes when I was in Diatuck County. How could it be false? There's a saying here that a giant dragon flying north is definitely a bad omen for the Southerners. The general will definitely be able to sweep the fields and make a long march to the south this time. With your eyes, you can see the wild ducks flying in the sky as giant dragons when you are drunk. That's enough. The drinking buddy laughed mercilessly. The merchant paused and waved his hand dejectedly. Forget it. It's boring to talk about this with an uneducated guy like you. Let's talk about the trip to River Valley County a few days ago. The people there told me that many refugees ran to the south, and I'm afraid there will be a famine. Or will there be no famine when there is a war? Just stop bragging about dragons. If you see His Majesty the King's flying dragon in the King's territory, I will believe it a little bit, the drinking buddy replied while chewing a steak. Accompanied by the sound of the poet's piano and the discussions of the guests, Leon and the other two quickly finished the food in front of them without distraction and got up again. Wiping his mouth, Leon looked around the guests in the tavern before leaving. There were resident poets and boastful drunkards, but unfortunately, there was not even one person dressed like an adventurer. Even the waiters were 3 or 5 big and rough men, not as pleasing to the eyes as the servants at home. Leon shook his head and felt that it was not good. In this kind of occasion, there should be a few adventurers with swords and cloaks who looked very mysterious and stood in the corner silently pretending to be masters. That would be called atmosphere. Next time, go to a cheaper tavern to see if there are such pretentious guys. After eating and drinking, the 3 left the tavern. Riding a horse out of the city from the west gate, they walked onto the Kingdom Avenue marked on the map and went farther and farther to the west. This trip will first go to the big city of Boneros to see if there are any messengers who can help deliver letters. To go to the west, you must first cross Casos County and Brinker County to reach the next-door Great Territory. Fortunately, the routes were all highways, with many villages and towns along the way, and there were few traces of bandits. The few people rode good horses, held weapons, and were not afraid of ordinary wild beasts. In just 2 days, the 3 of them approached the border between Brink and Casos. This is easy to recognize because as we move closer, there's a very eye-catching mountain at the junction of the 2 counties. Walking on the mountain road, Leon stared at the simple map in his hand. If they walked correctly, next to the mountain next to them, They should have escaped from the outer woodland of the nightmare forest. Leon, look there, there's a body. Roark patted his companion on the shoulder from the horseback. After hearing this, Leon raised his head and immediately put away the map and looked in the direction pointed. But the corpse beside the mountain road had obviously been dead for a long time, and the appearance of the rotting corpse could no longer be distinguished. However, the shape of the armor he wore looked very familiar. Can't it har? Leon urged his horse forward and looked down at the enemy soldier whose armor was broken and whose death was miserable. Maybe it's one of the parts that ran away from Selva. Azarian stepped forward to observe the huge and terrifying laceration on the waist of the corpse and guessed. Did that big guy actually chase them all the way here? That's awesome, Loark said in surprise. Leon sighed. This is easy for the griffin. We walk slowly, but in the sky, it may not take long for the griffin to fly all over Casos County. Those cantors who were targeted by him, at the beginning there's no way the Darman can escape pursuit. Well, it would be great if he could carry us. Maybe it has built a nest on the top of this mountain. Why don't you go up and discuss it with it? Azarian looked up at the towering mountain and joked. With that mountain climbing effort, I'm afraid we might have reached Bueniraz. Leon shook his head. The griffin left that day and never came back, and now he doesn't know where to make his home. Since he started raising horses in the territory, he has gradually given up his fantasy of Death Claws. Can't afford it all. Ka Sledgehammer can ride the Death Claw. He is the emperor, and he is just a little knight. How can he have so much money to burn? Even if the griffin's food was calculated in terms of cattle and sheep, it would cost a terrifying amount of money to eat for a year. What's more, the big guy also likes to eat horses. How can he afford it? It's definitely not possible to tempt it to follow you simply by relying on food. That guy can come to Selva to visit him occasionally, which is considered loyal enough. Of course, I would still look for traces of it if I have the chance in the future. Maybe it actually built a nest nearby, as Azarian said. If you can offer it some sacrifices from time to time, it will be a protection fee, and maybe it can protect the safety of Selva. Following the caravan on the Kingdom Avenue, Leon saw the ancient stone arch bridge across the river in the distance, and the magnificent city outline surrounded by tall walls in the distance. In any case, the three of them were shocked when they saw the first destination of this trip, and their faces got rid of the fatigue of the journey for many days. Compared with the ordinary towns along the way, the most famous city in Falair territory, which was called Dragon Throat by merchants, was very close to the holy city of Rolander, the hometown of the original owner. In particular, the towering spire buildings that reached the sky from a distance reminded Lohak and Azarian of the great temple of Rolander, which aroused a strong sense of homesickness. Passing through the long stone bridge, crossing the wide tributary of the Rashina River, and slowly queuing up with the merchants to enter the huge city gate. However, the Knights of the Grey Fir Valley territory did not have so many privileges in the Falair territory. The officers and tax collectors at the city gate counted the number of people, horses, and bags, and Leon and his two companions did not reduce the entrance fee. According to the merchants who traveled with them on the road, unless the king came in person, even if you were the Duke of Westrel, you had to pay a penny to enter the city. Falair always recognized money rather than people. Everyone could only pay the money and enter the city honestly. Then, what appeared before their eyes was a vibrant and prosperous scene. Merchants from various countries dressed differently in the streets and alleys, and there were even merchants wearing cantadars selling goods in the market, as if the two countries were not at war. On the wide market streets, there were all kinds of stalls and shops, from exquisite cloth, blankets, and jewelry, to a variety of pottery and iron utensils, grain and spices. All kinds of goods were dazzling. In the shops, travelers and vendors from all over the world were bustling, and the sounds of hawking and bargaining were very lively. Passing by a jewelry store, Leon suddenly had the urge to buy some souvenirs for someone, but considering that money is needed everywhere, he suppressed this little extravagant idea. Crossing the streets, the planning of the big city is good, much better than the living environment of his master. At least the filth Leon saw on the way from the east gate into the city is much less than that of Feroris. Of course, It may also be that the Rushina River near Dragonthroat City has a higher cleaning effect than the river in Feror City. The Mother River has raised generations of Orland people with shit and urine. And the Orland people have fed their shit and urine to the Mother River generation after generation. Asked the address of the nearby Chamber of Commerce from a passerby. Lohak stayed outside the building to watch the horses. Leon and Azirian entered the hall and asked the staff in robes inside about the postal business. 0.3 gold crowns? Leon's voice was a little high. This was 10 times higher than the price he had asked from the merchants before. Respected Sir Pendragon, you have to consider that the routes that the messengers travel have been greatly changed due to the war in the central region, and price increases are inevitable. The fat old man wearing small glasses behind the wooden window counter swiped a few times on the slide rule, not caring whether the country knight could understand it or not, and compared the calculation results of various expenses to him. Especially your letter. The destination is the farthest place in this batch. The price of 3 gold crowns is very reasonable. No matter where you are in Dragonmaw City, you can't find a place cheaper than ours. Reluctantly, he took his companions to run to several more places that accept letter delivery. Sure enough, as soon as the destination was stated, the postage they quoted was even more outrageous. Sighing, he had no choice but to return to the original Chamber of Commerce, and Leon paid the money obediently with a painful face. Leon walked out of the Chamber of Commerce, thinking that when he got the ransom in the future, he must reimburse the postage and travel expenses from it first, and then distribute the money to the people. He went to find a hotel with his friends in a bad mood. Fortunately, the fresh things he saw along the way made Leon gradually forget the memory of being slaughtered. He looked at the figures with double horns on their heads not far away, and he was amazed. Those horned people were tall and strong. Each of them was more than 2 meters tall, with thick necks, dark brown skin like mountain rocks, and pale hair. Their facial features were sharp, their noses were high, their foreheads were thick, and their faces were like sculptures. Of course, the most prominent feature was the pair of horns on their heads that were curved upwards. Although I had seen humanoid creatures like wild goblins, those guys who were quacking were obviously closer to monsters. Now I saw with my own eyes another truly intelligent race different from humans. In particular, they also integrated into the noisy crowd around them very normally, and local city residents and vendors ignored them. Only travelers from other places like himself would stop and look at those strange, tall, horned people. Is that a demon? Lohak stared at the tall figures going away with his mouth wide open. Leon couldn't help but glance at his companions when he heard this. After all, Lohak had been possessed by a real demon, so it was a bit humorous to speculate on the races of those horned people. Do you know what race they are? Leon asked another companion. The son of a noble was obviously much more knowledgeable than himself and Lohak. It should be Floris, also known as dragon blood people, half-dragon people. It is said that their country is at the southernmost tip of the continent, even further south in the grasslands of the Uriah people. I have only read about it in books, and today is the first time I have seen it with my own eyes. Azirian explained to his companions with the same amazement in his eyes. The world is so big that there are all kinds of wonders. Leon sighed, wondering if these people would have a hard time sleeping on their heads. With those big horns, how high would the pillows be? Unfortunately, after seeing those dragon people, they never saw other non-human intelligent races in the city. Leon knew that there should be dwarves similar to his impression in this world. Hirain means short people in Pharaoh language. Azirian said that the special steel for forging the Thornblade came from the hands of those dwarves named Hirain. But in fact, according to what Azirian said, at least in the western part of the continent, Hirain had disappeared for hundreds of years. Almost no one has seen those short master craftsmen again. As for the elves in novels and movies in Leon's previous life, there are also similar elves in the folklore of Syrian. But that is already a legend closer to mythology. Just like people in the tavern bragging about seeing dragons, it is illusory, and not like the dwarves, there is no real evidence of their existence. And the orcs. The Syrian side has always described the Cantarters and Uriahs as fanged, savage, and brutal man-eating monsters. But it was not until the Cantartar army really broke through Rolander that the original owner, a civilian, saw that they were indeed savage and brutal, but they were also humans with normal facial features and limbs. In Selva, Leon occasionally heard similar descriptions of the existence of barbarians outside the north of Orland from the children at home. I just don't know if it is another human group abstracted in the conflict or the real savage orcs. After finding a suitable tavern with a nice environment to stay, Leon asked the owner, who looked well-informed about how to get from Dragonmaw City to the western port of Canadar. Sure enough, the movies and novels I watched on Earth in the past were not deceiving me. After spending some money on wine, the owner explained the two main routes in detail. One is by land, going directly out of the South Gate and heading south along the main trade route of the two countries. The other is by water. We can take a merchant ship from the dock of Dragonmaw City, enter the ocean from the mouth of the Rushina River, and reach your destination along the coastal route. Both routes are possible, but the water route is much faster than the land route, and there are not as many customs clearance troubles along the way as on the land route. But taking a ship also has its own troubles, such as the passenger ship fare is not cheap, and there are risks such as pirates and storms on the road. Of course, since this offshore route has been stable for many years, the probability of encountering an accident is not high. Besides, even if they travel by land, such a long distance and journey also poses the risk of encountering bandits. Canadar is not a well-ordered place. Considering all factors, after some discussion, everyone unanimously decided to travel by water. They should arrive as soon as possible. Take your companions to the port to find a boat. There are not many ships going out to sea at this time of year, and even fewer merchant ships willing to carry passengers. When they finally found a ship with space, the captain suddenly looked past Leon and carefully looked up and down at Azirian behind him. Just as Leon was surprised by his reaction, the captain spoke. Azirian was so angry with just one sentence. No women can be brought on board. She can't get on board. The captain raised his chin to signal Azirian. Ah! Leon and Lohak widened their eyes. They wondered if the captain had bad eyesight or a bad brain. Although Azirian has been able to wash himself up every day since he got rid of the embarrassment of fleeing, the noble boy is indeed fair and handsome. But he can't be mistaken for a girl, right? Leon turned around and looked at his companion, who was frowning and obviously a little angry. Well, the collar on his neck is high, which does cover his Adam's apple. But this doesn't mean that a boy is a girl. Besides, when bathing by the river, Leon was sure that he had seen his companion's true symbol of manliness, and his chest was completely flat. His good brother could never be so bloody as to be a Mulan who hides her gender. Are you humiliating me? Azirian lowered his voice, pulled down his collar to reveal his Adam's apple, and questioned the captain. If he wasn't in a good mood, he would have wanted to draw his sword. Leon held his forehead and repeatedly emphasized that his companion was a man. Seeing the Adam's apple, the captain didn't say anything shocking anymore. He quickly laughed, took off his hat, bowed his head to apologize, and explained. It turns out that in the past, a traveler who was on a boat secretly dressed up a girl as a boy and took her on his boat. As a result, an unexpected situation occurred, causing a lot of trouble on the boat. The captain now saw that Azirian was so handsome, so he tried to cheat casually, just in case he was afraid that he had made a mistake again. After hearing the explanation, Azirian had to accept the other party's apology. After all, to some extent, this was also a compliment to his appearance. After a small episode, they agreed to board the ship tomorrow, and everyone left the dock and returned to the hotel. The sun gradually set in the west. The afterglow of the evening fell on the shoulders of people in the streets and alleys. The prosperous Dragonmaw City is not like other ordinary cities. Although the city gates have been closed for a long time, the city still has to ring the tower bells to enforce curfew until late at noon. Residents and businessmen who have been busy all day gathered in taverns of all sizes in the city, drinking wine produced from all over the continent. People listened to the poets singing, admired the dancers in the tavern, and indulged themselves in venting their fatigue. Leon still sat in a secluded corner. After eating and drinking, he played a simple chess game with his friends on the table. This was a small gift given to the three of them by the merchant friend on the way to thank them for driving away the beasts. I have to say that the rules are quite interesting, which relieved a lot of boring time on their journey. There is still a lot of time before boarding the ship tomorrow. It is really hard to sleep so early, so the three of them simply drank and played chess in the tavern to pass the time. As the number of customers in the store increased, Leon finally saw the atmosphere of the so-called tavern in another world that he had expected in the past. In addition to the drunken drinkers and the poets playing the strings, there are also guests with swords and sabers in the tavern. Some are foreign warriors escorting the caravan, and some are city guards who have time to go out and get drunk. Of course, when it was almost night, Leon also saw the ancient professions that appeared in many taverns in the towns along the way. The flamboyant dancers in thin clothes lifted their skirts and danced to the music, passing by the seats of the drinkers. The rough harassment and teasing of the men and the provocative laughter of the dancers immediately became one. Soon someone stood up to accept the invitation and took them to the second floor to enjoy the night, which also created a considerable income for the tavern. A young lady dressed very openly, with a big searchlight that was particularly dazzling under the oil lamp, came to the three-person table and held up the big thunder to try to attract customers, especially the handsome Azerian. Many dancers have deliberately walked past the noble boy because of his good looks. But obviously, he was born in an aristocratic family and naturally had no interest in such an invitation, and he declined the dancers who came to flirt with him one by one. The hot-blooded Lohak was teased by the dancers and his eyes were straight, and he was a little moved, but suddenly he remembered that his relatives were still missing, and the fire in his heart was instantly extinguished as if a basin of cold water was poured on his head. Leon also rejected the invitation. Even though he had been abstinent for a long time since he woke up, he didn't dare to show any interest in this aspect. Not only did he not want to be a ladybug and try to keep himself clean, but he was also forced by the situation to become a brother of the no-masturbation bar. This vigorous body is not without normal physiological needs, but now there's a wizard lady watching in the body, and he has completely given up the idea of casting spells manually. Otherwise, is he going to do a live broadcast for Miss Lola? What if I anger the other party and can't fight one day? I mean the arrow of ISA. Soon, the dancers disappeared in the lobby of the tavern with their trophies. The three of them looked at the various aspects of the world in the corner. After the noise of soliciting customers disappeared, the lobby of the tavern became a little quieter. Leon listened carefully and noticed the song of the poet in the tavern not far away, which was very beautiful and melodious. The poet was a middle-aged man wearing colorful clothes. He had 2 curved mustaches and a beautiful hat. His voice was steady and long when he sang poems, and the melancholy temperament on his face was also very contagious. The poem, praising beautiful love, was sung slowly as he sang, as if there was a particularly fascinating power. Leon was immersed in his rhythm unconsciously. I thought this tavern was highly recommended by passers-by because of those gorgeous dancers. Now it seems that the resident poet invited by the boss is really extraordinary. At the end of a long poem, the guests in the tavern applauded with great pleasure. The poet smiled and took off his hat to salute the audience. Leon also clapped his hands and praised his performance. When the applause ended, just as he was waiting for the poet to continue singing another song, he suddenly heard faint whispers from his seat by the window. Leon looked around in confusion. It was obvious that the voices did not come from his companions, nor from the drinkers at other tables around. With his head tilted, Leon slightly raised the window leaf beside him and looked through the gap. Outside the dim tavern, he saw a few people whose faces could not be seen clearly, telling a dancer something. Brothers just want to give him a good beating to teach him a lesson. Don't worry, no one will be killed. The fierce man with a scar on his face patted the dancers, but impatiently, urging her to do as she was told. After accepting the reward from these gangsters, the dancer thought that the money would save her from working for several days, so she suppressed her suspicion. Under the moonlight, people in the darkness of the alley ended their brief conversations, and the dancer turned around and came to the door of the tavern to calm down. She walked up the steps and pushed in the door. With a shy and touching expression on her face, she came to the melancholy poet. "Sir, your singing is like a spring breeze passing through my heart. I wonder if you would like to compose some beautiful melodies with me tonight." The dancer's cheeks were red, and she boldly held the poet's arm in a straightforward courtship. The poet, who was leaning on the beam, stopped the poem he was about to sing. When he saw the beautiful face of the dancer, his melancholy expression immediately turned into a proud smile, and his temperament suddenly became rich and greasy. "A cute little nightingale." The poet put down his piano and put his arms around the dancer's waist. "Why not? Maybe I will write a new poem for you tonight." He always accepts free encounters. There were boos all around. "Are you leaving now? We haven't heard enough yet. At least sing a few more heroic epics." Several drinkers knocked on the table in dissatisfaction. "Sorry, everyone. I am a free-singing minstrel. I will not just stop and sing in one place. Let the uneducated and unskilled person from before do it." Although his poems are like things about the cycle of grains, his voice is not good. At least it's not bad. The bard raised his hat and pulled the young dancer upstairs without any hesitation. The tavern owner shrugged. The poet was just staying here for a few days to perform for charity, and there was nothing he could do to save him. "Sir, go outside." The dancer lay next to the poet's ear and gently seduced. "Just like what you just sang, let's try to have a tryst under the night like in the poem. Field faction? Ha ha ha, okay," the poet said with joy, a lustful smile on his face, as if he was surprised that this girl knew how to have fun, and his steps couldn't help but become a little lighter. "Come on," the dancer pulled the poet out of the tavern. "What a pity. Your Excellency's poetry is really nice and beautiful." Azarian watched the other party being pulled out of the tavern by the dancer, feeling a little regretful. Even when his father held events in the past, he had never invited a poet of this caliber. When he didn't hear an answer, he looked at Leon, only to see his partner peeking out of the window. "What are you looking at? What's going on outside?" Azarian asked. "Let me see what's going on." Leon waved his hand at him, wondering if it was a common occurrence in the tavern like a fight. Under the hazy moonlight night, the dancing girl walked into the alley with the smiling middle-aged poet. As soon as the dancer turned around and lay down on the wall, the poet's hands touched his pants. 7 black figures immediately emerged from the dim shadow behind her. The ambushers swarmed up from behind the poet, and their big hands wearing thick leather gloves covered the poet's mouth, which was about to scream in terror. The remaining few people restrained the poet's hands and feet. The dancer turned back, covering her mouth in fear, not daring to stay for a moment longer, turning around and running into the night. And those people didn't pay attention to her. The vicious gangster headed by him whispered into the ears of the struggling poet, "It's easy for us to find you, but you still dare to stay in the city. Mr. Roddy asked me to report to you on his behalf. Say hello, Master Goliath." The poet, whose mouth was gagged with leather gloves, shook his head frantically from side to side, as if he noticed something through the faint light. He jerked his head to the left, hitting the kidnapper's nose, causing the man to have a nose ache and turn red. "Help! Help me! You. The poet took advantage of this only opportunity. In panic, he raised his head to look at the eyes between the window leaves on the wall and shouted for help. However, he was immediately punched in the stomach and doubled up like a shrimp in pain. The kidnapper, who had regained his composure, became angry and pinched the poet's cheek and stuffed the cloth into the poet's mouth, letting his men tie up the struggling poet. The leader of the gangster, who was touching his nose, looked up in the direction where the other party had just called for help and directly met the eyes of Leon, who did not dodge behind the gap between the window leaves. "Stop meddling in your own damn business. Let's see if we get together again, and I'll do you." The gangster leader pointed at Leon behind the window and threatened with his yellow teeth bared. Leon ignored him and just watched as the accomplice next to the man picked up the tied poet and ran out of the alley groaning. "Damn it, are you still watching?" The gangster leader, who walked to the alley, turned back and saw that the eyes were still staring behind the gap in the window leaves. Before leaving in anger, he picked up a stone from the ground and threw it towards it. Leon let go, and the falling window leaves snapped, blocking the incoming rocks. Apparently, this is not a simple fight. The word lust means a knife on the head. Unfortunately, the phonetic word for lust in Pharaoh language does not have this connotation. However, thinking of the poet's frightened eyes and pleading, he still felt that he should do his best to help, and it would not be in vain for the knight's oath he had just sworn for a few days. Turning back to explain to Azarian what he had just seen, Leon stood up and walked towards the guard who was drinking at the table in front. Azarian also pulled Loark, who was bored, to follow him. Leon patted the guard on the shoulder. "Oh, I saw that the poet was kidnapped outside." Before he finished speaking, the other party came to him with a dazed look in his eyes, mumbling something like "Mary, Mary." Silently dodging the drunk's grab, Leon pushed the man away, helplessly turning around and going to the bar. He told the tavern owner what he saw, but the owner spread his hands. "If it happened in the store, I would try my best to stop it, but since it happened outside the store, I don't want to care. We can't cause trouble for ourselves and our business." The tavern owner shook his head and said he could not help. "Then can you tell me where I can find the guard in charge?" Leon asked. "Go out and walk to the right. You may meet patrolling soldiers." The tavern owner pointed in a direction. Human lives are at stake. Leon did not delay any longer and immediately pushed the door out. The hazy color of the moonlit night enveloped the street, and there was only a lonely, cool breeze under the shadow of the empty person, and the dozing Lohak also woke up. "Go call the guard?" Azarian asked on the side. If the guards had really come, the poet would have been chopped into pieces. "You go and notify them. I'll chase them and see what's going on." Leon nodded to him. Those thugs carrying a living person shouldn't be able to run fast. Separately, Leon and Lohak followed the direction of the road the kidnappers left. Turning the corner, they saw from a distance that the men carried the poet into a secluded back street. Drawing their swords, the two quickly chased after them. As soon as they walked into the middle, they found that the kidnappers had already thrown the tied-up poet in the corner, and the thugs in leather armor were waiting for them with swords and hammers. "I told you not to meddle in other people's business. Have you listened to this guy's heroic songs too much? Or have you drunk horse urine?" The leader of the gang patted the blade in his hand and said viciously, "I'll give you one last chance to get out of here, otherwise I'll sink you and this guy into the Rushina River to feed the fish." Leon frowned and looked at these guys who were standing in an awkward position. Their steps were sloppy and empty, without any posture or gait. They were just some brave and fierce hooligans, only slightly better than the village ruffians they met at the beginning. "We are knights of the Thornflower family in Grey Fir Valley. For your repeated rude remarks, it is merciful to sentence you to whipping and caning. Even the execution of you is reasonable." Lowering the sword, Leon warned the leading thug, "Now, I order you to explain your kidnapping behavior immediately." "Knight!" The leading thug raised his eyebrows and looked at the two young men in cloaks in the moonlight. One was ordinary and the other was tall, but the appearance of both was obviously that of young boys who had not faded. He couldn't help but laugh contemptuously. "Where did this little brat come from to play the ranger knight game here? Haha, if you are a knight, I am the Count of Boneros." The thugs on the side also laughed unscrupulously. Leon touched the leather bucket on his waist, but considering the dim night, he gave up this useless move. Besides, even in broad daylight, none of the illiterate people in front of him could read or recognize the thornflower emblem. The face is too young. Maybe it will be more convincing to cover up the appearance in the future. "Don't talk nonsense, boss. Kill them." An impatient thug shook his head and raised the iron-wrapped club to step forward. "Leon, this." Lohak scratched his cheek and looked at his partner with a strange expression. The son of a sergeant who grew up in the barracks didn't know whether to kill him or deal with it according to the experience of fighting in the city of Rolander in the past. Just treat it as a drunken exercise, try not to cause death. After all, it was not in the Grey Fir Valley. Leon took off the scabbard with his left hand, raised the sword with his right hand, and put the sharp blade back into the scabbard in front of him. Quick fight and quick decision. "Okay." Lohak put away the long sword, and a grim smile appeared on his honest face. Without Olivia's daily beating, he had nowhere to vent his energy all the way, and he was almost sick. Seeing that the two teenagers were so foolish as to take the initiative to put away the sharp blades, the gang leader, who was still hesitant, immediately called his men to surround them side by side with a fierce momentum. "Come on together. Make a few holes in these two guys." Not wanting to throw the scabbard away, Leon just held the handle with his right hand and held the scabbard with his left hand and took a left step. He held the weapon on the right side with both hands using half-sword technique and took a half-sword hoe to meet the enemy who rushed on. Perhaps he was used to the weird steps when Olivia beat him up, and seeing that the gangsters who ran straight up couldn't even move forward and backward in a group fight, Leon was even a little disappointed. He took the initiative to step forward to face the attack that was coming straight at his face, stepped diagonally with his right step, and the shiny armor protruded from under the cloak, and he raised the scabbard to block the thoughtless chop. And at the same time, the pommel of the hilt held in his right hand hit the gangster's face like a hammer. Several bloody yellow teeth were knocked out of his mouth, and his side chin was hit by a hammering force that was more terrible than a heavy punch, knocking him down instantly, giving him a baby-like sleep. Then, from the half-sword hoe style, the force was dispersed, and Leon naturally switched to the true cross style of facing the enemy sideways. Learning the key points of the cat spin, every joint of the body was linked to exert force as much as possible. With the right foot as the center point, the steps were rotated, the left arm drew a circle, pressed down the scabbard hard, and knocked down the blade that stabbed almost at the same time from the right side. The end of the scabbard pointed directly at the enemy's face and easily broke the gangster's nose. The gangster covered his face with both hands and wailed with his face up, lifting the handle and turning around. Leon held the sword at an angle and used a frontal pseudo-cross posture to face the enemy on the left, who was separated by this step. But he saw that the gangster, with a vicious expression, was already retreating in fear. Just a breath. At the same time, all his companions who surrounded the young man fell. A man fell to the ground peacefully with his feet upright, not knowing whether he was alive or dead. One hugged her face and rolled and screamed on the ground like her dead mother. Holding the iron-headed mallet in his hand, the gangster's legs became weak, and he couldn't feel the sense of security brought by the weapon. You are really knights?" Leon tilted his head and just smiled. He understood why the knight whose head was shot by him was not interested in treating him. If the enemy is 8 feet away from you, you can see through all the opponent's next choices and actions. You will not feel the pressure, and naturally you will not be able to stimulate your body and brain to respond to crises. Not far to the right, Loark, who only used his 2 fists, was only a moment slower than Leon, and then solved the other 4 enemies that surrounded him. The tall boy's right arm, wrapped in an iron glove, lifted up the gangster with his head hanging down and his body lying limp. He shook his head and dropped the guy whose face was as swollen as a pig's head with no eye slit. He regretted that he hadn't warmed up yet. He couldn't hold back his strength and almost beat the person to death, but he still felt that the beating was more painful when Olivia pinned him in the corner and beat him. Lowering his sword with both hands, Leon slowly walked towards the last gangster. "Now, do you want to honestly confess to the kidnapping, or do you want to have a good sleep with your friends?" The frightened gangsters instinctively wanted to escape, but they could only lean against the wall behind them. This was the position they chose to surround each other, but now they had no way to retreat. Throwing down the mallet, the gangster's knees weakened, and he raised his hands and knelt on the ground like a concubine. No, young master. Master Knight, I offended you just now without thinking. Please give me a few kicks to vent my anger, sir. You can give me a lot. Say some good parts." The villain was just settling some personal grudges for the boss. Besides, that guy wasn't a good person either. The younger ones kidnapping him were just dog-eat-dog at best, but they didn't hurt any honest people. "What do you mean?" Leon frowned. As if grasping a life-saving straw, the gangster raised his head and pointed to the middle-aged poet who was tied up in the corner and hunched over like a caterpillar. "This guy's name is Goliad, and he's not a good guy. The boss paid a lot of money to treat him at home because of his reputation. As a result, this bastard not only ate and drank for free, but also seduced the boss's wife. She was abducted by him, and there is no news about her to this day. It took us a while to find the trace of this bastard. Ah! Leon hung up his sword again and couldn't help scratching his head. Did he do bad things with good intentions? He looked at his companion and pointed at the struggling poet not far away. Roark immediately walked over and pulled out the rag balls from the man's mouth. Ahem, cough, bah! You're spitting blood. When did I abduct Lord Rhodey's wife? I just slightly guided the beautiful lady with broken wings to break through the cruel prison and be free to find true happiness, the poet retorted awkwardly and used an exclamation at the end of the words. When you were running away from your boss's house, you jumped out of the window of my wife's room with your butt naked. Who else could it be if you hadn't kidnapped my wife? The gangster couldn't help but cursed angrily. When the boss encountered such an experience, he couldn't help but feel sympathy for the scumbag. Which man can bear the weight of the green crown on his head? Ah, those are just the beautiful memories that the pair of mandarin ducks gave me as part of their farewell. How do you ordinary people understand the soul resonance in them? As he spoke, the poet sang again, as if he was reminiscing. Leon pinched his eyebrows, really regretting meddling in his own business. The people in this city are so tossing, and he didn't quite understand the confusing relationship information for a while. Fortunately, at this moment, there were urgent footsteps coming from outside the alley. When he looked back, it was Azirian who came with the guards holding torches high. Young knights, I will remember your help. In time, a poem praising your chivalry will spread across the continent. Even though he was being held by the Dragon Maw soldiers, the embarrassed poet did not forget to look back and thank them in a rhythmic tone. Shut up and go in. The guard kicked the middle-aged poet on the butt and kicked him into the cell. The controversial reputation of the other party would not attract the soldiers of Dragon Maw to treat him with any preferential treatment. What's more, he is now accused of seducing a married woman and abducting someone else's wife. Such a serious crime needs to be investigated slowly. Next to the poet, several gangsters who committed kidnapping were also thrown into prison by the soldiers. It is not difficult to explain the cause and effect clearly. After showing the documents proving the knight's identity and the testimony of the tavern owner to the captain of the Dragon Maw City Guard, who was in charge of this area, Leon and the other two were soon respectfully sent back to the tavern where they were staying. The behavior of several people was considered to be a heroic act, like a ranger knight. If it weren't for repeatedly stating that he would leave by boat the next day, the captain of the guard would even report their righteous act of stopping the crime to the Dragon Maw City Council and apply for a certain amount of reward. Unfortunately, everyone really didn't have time to stay in this city to wait for him to complete the complicated approval procedures. Before parting with the captain of the guard, Leon asked curiously about the entanglement in the matter he intervened in. After a simple chat in the tavern, I learned that the middle-aged man named Goliad seemed to be a very famous bard, but his reputation was worrying, and he was a representative of the kind of poets on the continent who had talent but no morals. He was especially known for not being able to control his pants, and he offended countless nobles. But I think it's a miracle that he has lived to this day since he became famous, the captain of the guard said to Leon with a burp. However, despite all the shameful legends of his debauchery, it still cannot cover up the talent of this poet. There are still many nobles and wealthy businessmen who don't care about his reputation. They invite him to participate in their own activities and banquets, and spend a lot of money to hope that he will recite poems and leave behind a lot of brilliant poems. The boss mentioned by the gangsters who were beaten down is one of them. I heard from the captain of the guard that he is a wealthy businessman in the city who has risen rapidly through maritime trade in the past 2 years. Apart from this, he doesn't have much reputation. Perhaps because of face, the guards did not receive reports from the wealthy businessman before. But the only gangster who can still speak did accuse Goliad with certainty. It is said that when the poet was invited to the boss Roddy's house, he kept flirting with the boss's wife. When people saw the lady for the last time, the angry Mr. Roddy found a disheveled Goliad in his wife's room the next day, and his wife herself disappeared. That day, many servants witnessed the strange sight of the bard jumping out of the window of the lady's room with his bare buttocks and escaping. The whole incident was not complicated, but it was an indescribable chaos. Fortunately, Leon slept peacefully for a night and put aside this small episode that had nothing to do with him. Even if the bard who behaved improperly was really a kidnapper, he would be punished by the laws of Dragonmaw City if he was imprisoned. The next day, the three boarded the ship as scheduled. The merchant ship loaded with cargo slowly left the dock and headed west along the Rushina River into the sea. Azirian and Lohak, who saw the ocean for the first time, did not leave the deck for a long time in front of the magnificent scenery of the blue sea and sky. Leon had seen the sea in his previous life, but he didn't have much emotion, and he knew that the next journey would be more boring than the land. As expected, the two teenagers lost interest in the unchanging seascape in less than half a day. In the next few days, everyone played chess in the cabin and slept, and occasionally participated in the wrestling activities organized by the sailors in their spare time. Since they didn't gamble, they couldn't join in more other entertainments on the ship. It was obviously a much faster waterway than on land, but the three of them felt extremely tortured. The salty sea breeze blew over the largest port in the west of the Kingdom of Canadar. On the masts of countless large and small ships on the dock, flocks of white seabirds would sometimes stop at the top to rest, overlooking the busy coastal city below like an ant nest. The western port has been particularly noisy in recent days, not because of the trade from all over the world in the port, but because of the celebrations that the Falcon family, which rules this city, is preparing in recent days. The heir of Count Falcon is about to usher in his wedding day. There was an endless stream of nobles coming from the surrounding areas. Even though a war was breaking out in the distant eastern part of the kingdom, King Aviat had already sent royal envoys to his staunch ally before the war began. Now that the distant country has given full support, the importance of the western port to the Kingdom of Cantartar is unparalleled. Even the city where King Aviat lives cannot be compared with this seaport that is constantly receiving powerful weapons, resources, and trade from the distant empire. On the cliffs near the sea, there is a huge castle complex built by the Falcon family at great expense from generation to generation. Servants and slaves are busy day and night in it, welcoming batches of invited guests. At this moment, only the foreign guests living in the courtyard buildings on the east side of the castle can enjoy the undisturbed tranquility as before. Warriors in uniform black and gold armor stood in front of the luxurious courtyard gate in the castle, staring at the endless stream of people in the distance with contempt and arrogance. Looking at the self-proclaimed noble Canadar rulers, the guards in black armor and gold edges seemed to be quietly watching a group of funny, primitive people. And in the courtyard, guarded by the black armor guards, a handsome blond boy in a thin waistcoat walked through the carefully cultivated grass and shrubs on the flat and exquisite stone carving road and came to the courtyard behind the building. The blond boy went around the hidden statue and finally found the familiar figure. Elena. He called the other person's name gently. Behind the ramp of the statue, the gentle woman who was sobbing stopped crying and turned back with tears in her eyes. "Are you still missing your family?" The boy sighed. "I had a nightmare again." Elena's voice trembled, and she choked a little. "I dreamed of my brother. I just hope he is still alive and safe." She was not surprised that the other party could find this place. The young man in front of her was one of the few friends she could talk to now. "I don't want to disturb you, but the master is coming back tonight. He specifically wants you and me. We all need to prepare." The handsome boy reminded helplessly. "Well, I know. Thank you, Corvus." Elena replied with a reluctant smile. The boy nodded and did not urge the poor lady who shared the same suffering as him, and turned away. The surroundings became quiet again. Elena stood up, wiped away her tears, and took a deep breath to calm her longing. The song of fate is unpredictable. It is a sad song. The smile faded in the illusion. With a whisper of the sun, moon, and stars, it gently tells. The low and gentle singing came from above. Elena turned around and looked at the castle battlements with cliffs behind her in surprise. A middle-aged poet in bright clothes leaned against it with a melancholy look, gently plucking the strings and singing a lamenting poem. "Ah, sad little Robin. Sir, who are you?" Elena opened her eyes in confusion. She had never seen this face before in such a long time. The poet's smile raised his curved mustache. He took off the feather hat on his head on the wall and bowed his head to greet. Goliard, a poet. Nice to meet you, ma'am. It's on the shelves. There will be more updates today. It is estimated that there will be more than 10,000 words, but the time is uncertain. Alas, I still have to go to work. I'm going to die suddenly. Leading the horses that were also somewhat listless, Leon and his companions set foot on the land of Canadar again. Looking at the magnificent ships in the distance, he had always been attracted by those huge ships with black sails before he landed. Compared with the strange-shaped ships anchored in the port, the Orland merchant ship that Leon and his companions took on this trip was just like a shabby little bathtub. Those big ships were flying black flags, and the center of the flags was outlined with a golden one-eyed pattern. But even if he asked Azirian about the meaning of the black-bottomed golden flag, the always-learned son of the nobles now shook his head blankly. He didn't know what country the symbol of the flag represented. Anyway, it was definitely not the style of Canadar. After observing from distance for a long time, Leon retracted his gaze. He looked at the Canadar soldiers patrolling in groups of 3 or 2 on the dock, and the scattered buildings in the distance that looked almost the same as the city of Orland. Before setting off on this journey, he was thinking about how different and how similar those ferocious Cantarters were from the Orlanders and the Syrians. The two countries of Orland and Syrians are undoubtedly Faroe people in terms of blood and culture. This is also true for the countries in the middle of the continent, such as Deneshan and Aurelia, that Leon has only heard of so far. The Faroe people are obviously a nation with a wide footprint. Since waking up, Leon has also seen many Cantarters who speak Uriah. Those Cantarter noble knights who speak foreign languages are almost the same as the Faroe people at first glance, if you don't look at their human face-carved helmets and some special decorations. The dress of ordinary Cantarter soldiers is even more mixed. Some look exactly the same as the Faroe people, and some look completely different from the Faroe style of nomadic weapons and armor. The various appearances of this kingdom are simply a hodgepodge. As for the Cantarter civilians, as he entered the city, he kept looking at the residents on the street. To be honest, if they didn't speak Uriah and put on the same clothes, Leon couldn't tell the difference between these people and the Orlanders and the Syrians. Fortunately, before this trip, Azirian had roughly made up for the two illiterate people when teaching him and Lohak the language about the reason why this kingdom was so strange. Going back to the earliest recorded era, there were many kingdoms of Faroe culture on this land of Canadar. At that time, Åland and Canadar did not exist yet, and the entire western part of the continent was full of small countries, still in an era of conflict. At that time, the two northern and southern regions were not as clearly marked on the map as they are today. But with the rise of the Uriah people in the south and the northward conquest of all the Faroe small kingdoms within the scope of Canadar, this land has embarked on a different path from other regions. The original culture of the land of Canadar was probably severely raped by the Uriah people from that time. During the most powerful period of the Uriah people, they once occupied the birthplace of the Faroe people and invaded Syrian from the west and south at the same time. Azirian didn't know much about the history of the Kingdom of Orland, but the son of the nobles remembered the historical records of Syrian very clearly. Before Orland and Canadar were unified and established, the Kingdom of Syrian, under the leadership of the Holy Sun Church, was fighting against the Uriah people. Syrian is an ancient country that witnessed the strong rise of the Uriah people and then their collapse. The coalition forces of the countries in the western continent thwarted the Uriah's conquest and eventually took back the ancestral land of the Faroe people and successfully restored the country. But it was not the direct resistance of the Faroe alliance that really drove the Uriah people back to the south. It was the backstab from this land that rose up more than 100 years after the land of Canadar was conquered. Several forces tore apart the rule of the Uriah people over this land, and the rising new kingdom united with the surrounding Faroe countries and killed the Uriah people back to the grassland. Of course, all the Faroe countries that helped this land did not expect that perhaps the newly born Canadar countries which had been ruled by the Urea people's culture for too long, actually inherited the aggressiveness of the Urea culture. An outstanding first-generation king swept away his competitors and established the current Canadar kingdom, and soon began to conflict with neighboring kingdoms. The kingdom of Syrian was also betrayed by Canadar. In fact, the Rolander Holy Land city was not located on the border in the territory of Syria at first. Why it became a border city before the city was broken is naturally the bitter tears of the kingdom of Syrian. However, when Leon heard this at the beginning, he was really a little surprised. In terms of the history of the establishment of the dynasty, the kingdom of Canadar was actually much earlier than the seemingly more cultural kingdom of Orland. Anyway, the Western continent countries have been entangled in the blood and fire of betrayal and alliance, and have tortured each other for hundreds of years, until now. Ironically, after hundreds of years of fighting and killing, the current kingdom of Canadar has completely played with the Urea people. The huge mercenary cavalry troops galloping on the land of Canadar now include countless Urea people. It is indeed hard to tell. After all, the Urea people and the Pharaoh people only have different cultural origins, and their races seem to be not much different from Leon's perspective. The three walked on the street, full of jargon, to find an inn. The result of Azirian's repeated intensive training was remarkable. Leon and Lohak can now barely understand the general meaning of some Urea language. It's just that they can't talk in long sentences, let alone hide their accents. But they found that there are many more foreigners with various accents in the Western port than they imagined. The strange Urea accents of Leon and Lohak are not eye-catching among a large number of foreign merchants in this far west coast far away from Syrian. However, the two of them still honestly handed over the task of negotiation to Azirian, who has an authentic accent. The three of them deliberately found an inn full of foreign merchants. As soon as they settled their bags, they began to try to collect information about the local Falcon family. After spending enough money on wine to clear the way, I learned from the sailors that the wealthy Falcon family did indeed purchase a large number of slaves for various channels to serve their castles and manors all year round. This is no secret, especially after the mysterious black-sailed ships came in recent years. The Falcon family's demand for slaves has increased several times. The mysterious foreigners on the black-sailed ships also seem to have a great interest in the slave trade. Hearing this news, Leon couldn't help but feel depressed. If Lohak's sister had been sold to an unknown overseas country in another world, it would be difficult to find her again in the future. Leon and the other two looked ugly for a long time, but they finally cheered up again. In any case, instead of guessing blindly, they should first find a way to contact people inside the Falcon family. As for the method of sneaking into the castle, when Leon learned that the son of Count Firkin was going to hold a wedding in the near future, he couldn't help but feel fortunate that the Baron Canadar's armor and seal ring that he originally brought with him to take advantage of the situation might come in handy. A faint smell of the sea drifted into the windowsill on the second floor of the hotel. Azirian carefully considered his words and bent over the table, writing a ceremonial document called Visit Letter with the signature of the son of the Baron of Readingburg. This is also the etiquette procedure for nobles to visit each other without being invited by the host. Leon felt that it was a bit similar to the visiting card in the customs of his homeland in his previous life. However, submitting the visiting letter at this time, close to the wedding celebration, is actually rude. Because for large-scale aristocratic events, such as weddings, if uninvited visitors do not greet in advance and specify the time, personnel, and purpose of the visit, the host family of the wedding may not be able to prepare for the reception if the financial resources or venue are insufficient. But now, apart from this method, there is no better way to get close to the castle of the Falcon family. Leon and the other two only hope that the local nobles will not refuse the son of a noble from a distant place to come to congratulate with gifts on this happy day. After all, with such a rich city and such a magnificent castle, there should be redundant rooms and stables for unexpected guests and horses. Trying to imitate the Cantarter people's wording habits, Azirian did not dare to say much in the letter. It was just necessary to mention that my father, Baron Dawson, died in battle and Leidingburg fell. He was traveling around the kingdom with gifts, hoping to get help from the nobles and seek opportunities for the family to make a comeback and regain the lost territory in the north. It was also fortunate that the various factions within each kingdom in this feudal continent were sufficiently dispersed. According to the captive manual, after Dawson's main territory in the north was occupied by Orland, the family only had a few manor territories in the far southeast. In this world without telephones and telegraphs, if you want to confirm the authenticity of the visitor's identity, it takes too long to send letters to each other over such a long distance. Generally speaking, if you really want to identify the identity of a strange noble, you can only look at his dress, speech, and travel style, and the herald officer can identify the family emblem. Of course, if you can produce a formal official document, it will be more convincing. However, the identity that Azirian forged was originally a noble heir whose family territory was lost, not a real baron. His family now has no territory, and even the title of nobility may be difficult to continue. Now he is busy running around and can't produce such documents. It makes sense. After stamping the emblem with the signet ring and putting the written visit envelope in it, Leon and Lohak put on Baron Dawson's armor and battle robe for Azirian. Leon was somewhat glad that he was busy with territory affairs before and had no time to find Brian the blacksmith to modify Dawson's annoying snake-carved helmet decoration. Now Azirian is fully equipped and wearing a distinctive noble sword. He really looks like a baron's son who lost his father at a young age and hesitated to take revenge. Leon touched his head as if he felt a little sorry for his brother. Even if it was not a disguise, this description was completely consistent with Azirian's true identity and experience. Thinking of this, he felt guilty. In order to help Lohak, Azirian did not express any opinion on this disguised identity that was like exposing his own scars. After talking to each other and setting the details of Azirian's disguised identity, Leon and Lohak played as servants, and the three of them mounted their horses and headed for the Falcon family castle on the cliff. All the levels were smooth. Since Azirian experienced the disguise experience in Selva, his acting skills seemed to be more extraordinary now. Moreover, this time his identity is different, and his noble temperament and fluent manners are seamless, so naturally he will not arouse the slightest suspicion of the guards guarding the pass. Besides, there are actually too many nobles who have gone to the castle to attend the wedding banquet recently. A small team of only 3 people like this can attract much attention. Riding on the avenue leading to the castle, Azirian greeted the nobles coming and going and completely integrated into his identity. Leon also bowed his head and saluted all kinds of masters. He was fine, but it was hard for Lohak, who was full of hatred in his heart. In order to find his sister, he had to suppress his hatred and bow to these enemy nobles. Entered the outer area of the castle with the visiting noble team. In the tower at the entrance, the knights of the Falcon family were informed of their identities and handed over the visiting letter. The 3 of them went home and waited patiently for the reply in the inn. The visiting letter stated their current address in Westernport. If the person in charge of the castle accepted the visit of son of Dawson, he would naturally send servants to inform them. Some painful waiting. Taking advantage of this time, Leon took his companions to find a high-end tailor shop in the city to choose a dress. The play had to be played out in full. Even if they couldn't attend the banquet, they still needed the right aristocratic clothing to interact with the Falcon family. But there was no time to order, so they just chose clothes that were almost suitable for their body shapes and bought them. Fortunately, Leon and Lohak only had to play servants, and only Azirian had to be scrutinized by the nobles. And the handsome son of the nobles was a walking clothes rack after getting cleaned up. Now, wearing a waisted robe with neat fabrics and gorgeous patterns, the young man's behavior was even more impeccable. Leon walked around the hotel, looking at his fair-skinned good brother, and nodded frequently. Replaying his past life and browsing video websites, Azirian can earn enough traffic without even turning on filters. After a short and anxious wait like this, The three of them were relieved when the servants of the Falcon family came to invite them to the banquet the next day. Following the sent servant into the castle again, after handing over a wedding gift that made Leon heartbroken, they settled in the inner castle building for entertaining guests. But before he could take a few more breaths, Azarian was received by the owner of the castle. Leon and Roark were naturally not qualified to follow them, so they could only act as servants and guard the room dutifully, silently praying that their partners could pass the test calmly. When Azarian returned safely and looked as normal as usual, both of them couldn't help but heave a sigh of relief. I don't know what kind of conversations he went through, but after all, he didn't reveal any flaws in his conversation with the local count. Roark went up and gave Azarian a bear hug, patting Azarian on the back. The gratitude is beyond words. My partner is risking his life for his own affairs. If anything goes wrong, he will be shattered to pieces and there will be no repayment. However, even if you survive the first level of sneaking into the castle, it does not mean that you will be able to look for people here next. Before entering, the servants had informed them in advance of the scope of their allowed activities. The area where he can move is not large at the moment. Azarian is okay. As long as he doesn't touch some restricted areas, he can walk around. But now Leon and Roark, who are playing his servants, can't run around without following him closely. Unlike the entourage of a great noble, the two of them don't have much freedom to move around without their master now. I really didn't see your stuff. I wasn't working in the West District that day. You must not have seen me. The beautiful maid with brown hair, blue eyes, and a mole on the corner of her, I hurriedly clarified to Azarian in the awkward Uriah language. Leon and the other two looked at the maid brought by the castle servants, and their excitement was immediately disappointed. Azarian shook his head. Well, it's not her. She is the only servant in the West District who fits your description. Circa Souls, do you remember other characteristics? The butler asked politely. Maybe I saw it wrong. Azarian was no longer persistent. He couldn't ask the other party to search for the so-called suspect in an area he had never been to. If the matter got out of hand, it would be troublesome to attract the attention of the Falcon family. After all, she was not from a real Canadar noble family. It would be okay to be drowned in the guests of all sizes who came to congratulate. If she provoked trouble and entered the sight of the surrounding nobles, there would always be a possibility of revealing her feat. In the past few days, the three of them played the role of master and servant, strolling in the area of the castle where they could move, thinking of many ways to talk to the servants and slaves around, and looking for her traces according to her appearance. The current situation is also a solution figured out after repeated attempts without results. Let Azarian accuse the suspect to the butler who manages the servants on the grounds of losing personal belongings. She is a beautiful pharaoh maid or slave in her 20s, with brown hair, blue eyes, and a teardrop mole on the left corner of her eye. When Leon heard the butler say that he had an impression, he thought he could finally find the lady, who knew that the person brought by the butler was still not Lohak's sister. After they left, Leon went forward and locked the door, then put away the respectful manner of playing a servant, relaxed, and sat on the chair. We will look for her separately after the wedding banquet begins. The three of them could not think of any more ideas, but the wedding banquet was approaching. At that time, the nobles would gather in the banquet hall. And in addition to the servants who were responsible for the service on that day, the other servants in the castle would gather to participate in the celebration activities belonging to this class. Maybe I can find Sister Lohak in the crowd at that time. Stepping up the stairs, Elena walked through the corridor on the second floor and came to the room that she resisted in her heart. Listening to the movement in it, she closed her eyes with sympathy and fear, lowered her head as if she still couldn't adapt, and raised her hand to knock on the door. Master, the Earl sent someone to notify you to go to the meeting. Elena spoke carefully to the people in the room. After that, she didn't dare to disturb them anymore, and stood aside obediently, waiting silently. Not long after, a middle-aged man in a black robe and red hair pushed open the door and walked out. Pilieno shook his robe and complained angrily. Why does he have so many problems all day long? The impatient, red-haired man pulled it in the air. With a bang, the metal magic wand suddenly appeared from the light and hit the floor. Hearing this angry, muffled sound, Irina was so scared that her body trembled and almost stuck to the wall behind her. Pilieno didn't care about the slave's fear. He just glanced at her, frowned, and walked past Irina with some lack of interest. I don't know what's going on. In the past half-month, I have become less and less interested in the slaves sent by the Firkin family. But Pilieno didn't care too much. He thought maybe he was just tired of these foreign slaves. Irina, leaning against the wall, waited nervously for the terrible footsteps to go farther and farther. Until she couldn't hear any movement at all, she seemed to have regained the ability to breathe. After stroking her chest, Elena turned around, walked into the room, and looked at the blond boy beside the bed. She looked at the poor man who had always taken care of her here with heartache. I will go to boil water for you to take a bath. Corvus shook his head and chuckled at her gently, stood up from the bed, closed his eyes, and muttered something. The next moment, scorching white flames burst out from his whole body. Even his blonde hair seemed to turn into wisps of white flames. It only burned for a moment and burned away like a clean. The white flames all over his body seemed to have no temperature and never ignited the blanket under his feet. Purifying himself, the flame of magic on the boy's body gradually extinguished. Looking at Elena's compassionate eyes, Corvus waved his hand and smiled at her calmly. Don't worry, I've been used to it for so many years. But you, have you rested well recently? I'm much better, but... Elena looked a little ashamed. Indeed, Pilieno's shift of attention relieved a lot of the pressure she and others had accumulated. But the burden did not disappear. It was just transferred to the poor man in front of him who shared the same suffering. The man with the staff in a black robe walked through the garden in front of the courtyard and headed towards the main castle building of the castle. Pilieno, who was disturbed, was agitated. The servants of the Falcon family on the road and the nobles of Canadar who knew his identity all saluted and avoided the black one-eyed robe when they saw it. But Pilieno, who was annoyed, was too lazy to pay attention to anyone. The footsteps of leather boots clattered. Just as he hurriedly passed the fountain, he suddenly felt his eyes brighten. An unintentional glance actually made him see a handsome noble boy. Looking at the young nobleman who was talking to the servants in the garden with two servants, Pilieno's heart was moved. Yes, he would immediately go to the Earl of Firkin to ask. It seems that being left in this boring seaport to guard the gate is not always a bad thing. His anxious pace slowed down. Pilieno touched the beard on his chin, and his mood suddenly became much better. Unaware of the approaching danger, Azirian still asked the maids about the whereabouts of Sister Lohak with a sunny face. Leon was bored and looked around. After all, facing the group of native Canadar, maids who were responsible for taking care of the garden, his little Uriah language was really useless. Looking around, he saw a man in a black robe and holding a stick passing by not far away. He was walking and staring at Azirian with a creepy look. Leon was slightly startled. What kind of eyes were those? He didn't know why this guy dressed as a black-robed wizard kept staring at his companions. Was it because he and his companions had behaved inappropriately or suspiciously? Is he really called Aetius? Leon heard this slightly familiar pronunciation and confirmed to his partner again and again. Well, that's what the nobles called him when they complained privately about the arrogance of the man in the robe. I didn't dare to interrupt and have a detailed chat with them because I was afraid of exposing my identity. Seeing the surprised expression on Leon's face, Azarian couldn't help but ask, "Do you know Artius?" The son of a nobleman had never seen this title in books or maps. Leon nodded. This time he did know a little more than his knowledgeable partner. It all depends on the information learned from the warlock advisor of Count Trassa, the mage empire located in the far east of the continent. If what the warlock consultant said is true, then the man in robes who stared at Azarian inexplicably during the day was indeed a mage from a foreign country. But how did the distant empire in the far east end up in the far west of the continent? Thinking of those big black sail ships, Leon suddenly raised his eyebrows. Maybe this different world is also a planet? So the Arsh's empire really conquered the edge of the continent like the legend, then sailed across the ocean in a sea ship, circled around, and finally landed in Canada. Of course, it is also possible that it sailed around from the sea along the outline of the continent. Putting aside irrelevant thoughts, he didn't care where these foreigners came from for the time being. What he was more concerned about was the other information that his partners got from the mouths of the nobles who were talking about it. There's a well-known restricted area in this castle. The Adius people turned the courtyard in the northeast corner of the castle into their embassy, which is guarded day and night by specialized foreign soldiers. No outsiders are allowed to enter. This made Leon have to think about it. He remembered clearly what the sailors coming and going from the dock said when he first came to Westernport for investigation. Those people who came off the mysterious Black Sail ship were very interested in the slave trade. After hearing this information, he was worried about the possibility that the lady was actually sold overseas. At the moment, it seems that besides such a bad outcome, there is another possibility. Although there's still too many places in the entire castle that I and others cannot investigate. But if the truth is true, Lohark's sister really happened to be trapped in the Adius embassy. Then even if I turn the outside upside down, I still can't find her. After making up his mind, Leon told his partner about his speculation, and the three of them discussed each other's next mission. Time flies in the busy castle. In a blink of an eye, it was the day of the wedding banquet of the heir to the Falcon family. The weather is calm and sunny. The grand banquet was held in the castle's most spacious and magnificent stone castle hall. A long, expensive carpet was spread all the way to the steps at the entrance to the courtyard. Countless nobles and knights put on luxurious and expensive dresses, holding their female companions on their arms, or being surrounded by different nobles, and entered the banquet hall to take their seats. Music was playing in the hall, poets played and sang, and dancers danced lightly. The long tables were covered with various delicacies and fine wines by the servants. The banquet held by the Canadar nobles was not too elegant. In the spacious hall, the joyful laughter of the powerful could be heard everywhere. But everything that could be seen at the wedding banquet had nothing to do with Leon and Roark. Because only Azirian could go to the main castle hall, he was the only one among the three who could search for Rohark's sister among the busy servants. And it was difficult for him to leave the banquet before the wedding ceremony was over. Leon told him that if he had the opportunity, he could try to contact the nobles of the Falcon family at the subsequent banquet and ask them whether Artias' embassy had purchased female slaves locally. Roark went to other places in the castle to participate in civilian activities organized by the servants, and searched among the crowds of servants and slaves who had finally gathered. Leon would later join Roark, but before doing so, he wanted to venture to the Asius embassy. Walking on the road to the castle, bypassing the noisy crowd, the surroundings have turned into a sea of celebration. Now even the castle guards can't notice him, an ordinary young servant walking among the crowd. On today, the wedding day, even a lowly servant can have a right to enjoy this grand celebration. The servants who got the chance to relax were having their own banquets in the west and south areas of the castle under the arrangements of the steward. There were open-air dances in the courtyard outside the castle, wrestling matches, and banquets in the servants' quarters where the servants were allowed to enjoy delicious food. The sounds of singing and dancing were equally lively. Leon walked through the bustling courtyard without any distractions and quietly passed through the currently silent garden courtyard. Recalling the direction in which the robed man he saw that day came, Leon quickly saw his destination. It's not too hard to find. After all, although Artias' embassy is off-limits, its conspicuous location on the castle heights is no secret. Anyone can find this as long as they keep walking along the garden path in the central courtyard to the east area of the castle. But I looked up from a distance and looked at the soldiers standing upright like sculptures on both sides of the embassy courtyard gate, wearing black armor with gold edges and holding axes and guns. Leon was in trouble. There was definitely no way to force his way in, not to mention that in the castle where the wedding banquet was being held, the guests were not even allowed to carry swords, so he was unarmed. Even if he had weapons and was wearing armor, he couldn't beat the 20 heavily armored infantrymen who were lined up against the high wall. Even if Olivia came, she couldn't rush in. Sighing, he was ready to give up temporarily and go back to look for him among the servants outside with Lohak. The matter of the embassy would probably have to be considered in the long run. Stepping back, Leon prepared to return the same way. Just as he walked back to the quiet and deserted garden courtyard, a sudden rustling sound beside him attracted his attention. For fear of running into the patrolling guards, Leon had prepared a lie to say he was lost, but he actually saw a big red but in the corner of the high wall of the castle courtyard not far away, trying to get into the bushes. Well, it wasn't really a sticking, but that particularly festive red seemed to be the color of the pants. What's going on? Leon was a little confused. How long had the wedding banquet just started? Could anyone be drunk? It doesn't look like a thief. How can a thief wear such conspicuous and bright clothes? Leon quietly moved along the side road. The big but that was arching back and forth seemed to be stuck. The two legs were pushing the ground hard and drilling into the castle wall, leaning against the bushes. Is there a hole behind the bushes? Leon was puzzled and walked closer on tiptoe. He just hesitated whether he should meddle in other people's business. The body suddenly stopped struggling, as if it heard Leon's footsteps. I cough. I'm here to find the toilet. Don't worry, I'm not a suspicious person. Hey, no matter if you're a brother or a sister, pull me up quickly. I will reward you handsomely after you come out. This voice seems a little familiar. Hey. My clothes are stuck. Please be gentle. The man behind the bush cried out in pain. Leon ignored him, grabbed the man's ankles with both hands, kicked the stone tile floor on the garden path, and pulled back with all his strength. There was a crack, the sound of tearing cloth. Leon only felt a looseness in front of him, took 2 steps back to slow down his momentum, and finally dragged the man out. The gorgeous feathered hat on his head fell aside, and the embarrassed man suddenly fell down on the grass. The brightly colored coat also had a big tear in it due to the tugging. Letting go and dropping the opponent's ankle, Leon tilted his head and looked at the man's face. Just one glance at the iconic 2-stroke mustache brought back his memory from half a month ago. Galliard? Why are you here? Leon asked in surprise. He heard the voice correctly. It was really the crooked poet he had seen in Dragonmaw City. Are we so destined to meet again in such a far place? The distance between Western Port and Dragonmaw City is more than 1,000 miles, even if you only look at the straight-line distance on the map. It's over. These are the clothes Miss Margarina just gave me. The poet lowered his head and picked up the clothes with some heartache, sighing. Then he raised his head and saw this familiar face, and he looked surprised. Hey, this is not the chivalrous and righteous, that. After thinking about the name in his mouth for a long time, the poet scratched his hair, but still couldn't remember the name, so he could only smile and narrow his eyes. Your Excellency, what do you call me? Leon was speechless. Didn't you say you were going to write a poem to praise us? But in the end, you couldn't even remember my last name. Remember, Lord Pandora? Thought it's Pendragon. Leon held his forehead. Oh, Lord Pendragon. The poet quickly stood up and patted the plaster on his legs, put on his hat, and put on a flattering smile. What a coincidence. I didn't expect you to be invited to this wedding banquet. Invite? Someone actually invited such a notorious and obscene poet to attend his son's wedding banquet. Isn't Count Falcon's brain out of his mind? Leon felt incredible and suddenly realized something was wrong. I was not invited to the banquet in a dignified way, so I couldn't talk about this with this guy now. I remember, weren't you imprisoned in Dragonmaw City Prison? What? Are you cleared of charges? Leon changed the topic to the other party. Of course, I have always been innocent, but people in the world often hear rumors and misunderstand me. The poet raised his head, raised his hand to stroke his mustache, and looked upright. Then what are you doing sneaking around here? I don't believe you were looking for the toilet just now. And you weren't trying to be a thief, right? Be careful, I report you to the guards. Leon crossed his arms and asked the other party first. Hiss. The false seriousness on Galliard's face collapsed in less than a second. He winked as if he couldn't find an excuse, so he had to look around to make sure there was no one around. Then he put his hand on his mouth and approached Leon with a vulgar expression. Let's discuss it. As long as you don't report me to the guards, I will tell you a secret path to happiness. Leon tilted his head back and distanced himself from the old face full of lust and disgust. Isn't there just a hole in the corner behind grass? Looking at how embarrassed you were when you were stuck just now? Why do you need to tell me? But what does happiness mean? You don't know, but there are so many lonely and empty canaries in this glorious castle. The poet lowered his voice and chuckled softly. Wouldn't it be pitiful if there were no good people to comfort these depressed birds? Not to mention the Earl's main castle apartment, just in the courtyard of the man in black in front of me. I have met many graceful beauties in these days. Let me tell you, that's called, can you enter the front yard? Leon suppressed his voice and grabbed the poet's shoulders. He didn't want to care if this bastard was having an affair with some lady in the castle. But if this hole could help him enter the courtyard of the Aedius people, it would be a good idea to give him a pillow when he was sleepy. It seems that you are also of the same kind. Seeing Leon's reaction, the poet seemed to have misunderstood. So he felt relieved and waved to him with a smile, and then bent down to push aside the bush that he had drilled just now. Leon looked through the gaps between the branches and saw the thick castle wall at the corner. There was indeed an inconspicuous crack in the shape of a human. The crack is not big and can only accommodate a person who is not fat and can pass through on his stomach. Leon squatted down, turned his head, and peered in. The crack penetrated the thick city wall and led directly to the sea view outside. However, from the current position, it seemed that there was a cliff on the coast outside the wall. Isn't there a cliff outside? Leon raised his head and looked at the poet with questioning eyes. This crack happens to be on the secret passage near the cliff. As long as you drill through it, there will be a small plank road under the entrance of the cave that can accommodate one person. Golly had looked proud. Plank road. Yes, it is a secret passage used to prevent the castle from being sieged, just in case of escape. It is not surprising that almost every castle has a small back door when it is built. I also followed the plank road to see the real entrance and exit. There's a small door sealed from the inside of the castle. It is estimated that it has not been opened for many years since it was built. The poet speaks with great experience. Leon raised his eyebrows when he heard this. He didn't know how many times this guy had climbed over the wall in the noble castle to steal people. He was so professional. No more talking. I have a date with Miss Margarina today. Please go ahead. I'll go first. Goliard pressed his hat, lay down again, arched into the bushes, and went out of the wall. This time he adjusted his posture and stretched out his hands first. Although it was difficult to drill, he was not stuck by accident. He watched silently and saw that the other party had indeed drilled through the cave. He didn't hear the scream of falling off the cliff. Only then did Leon tentatively lean over to follow, and first leaned his upper body over. His original body was narrower than that of the middle-aged poet, so it was naturally easier to drill. He poked his head out of the crack and looked down. On the edge of the cliff, where the sea breeze was blowing, there was a narrow old plank road against the rock wall. Looking at the reefs under the cliff where the sea water was beating, even if Leon didn't have acrophobia, he was a little nervous about the dangerous cliff. Turning his neck to look to the left, Goliath had already covered his hat and walked a distance along the outer wall of the castle on the plank road. There was no fear on his face full of spring, and he looked like he couldn't wait to have a tryst with the so-called Miss Margarina. Leon felt that he had some impression of this lady's name. It seemed that he had heard it frequently in the past few days. Forget it. Since he didn't know her, it had nothing to do with him anyway. Without hesitation, Leon also climbed out of the gap, holding the cave entrance and the rock wall in front. He turned carefully and stepped on the plank road that could only accommodate one person. The soles of his feet stepped firmly on the old wooden platform, and a creaking sound made Leon's back cold. While the poet was still not far away, he quickly asked from a distance, "Hey, you haven't told me how to get into the yard of those men in black." Goriard turned his head towards him when he heard the question, raised his right hand, and pointed at the wall above. Leon looked up and looked where he pointed. The outer wall of the castle was covered with traces of erosion from the wind and sun for many years, especially the uneven gaps between the bricks and stones. He understood what Goriard meant. This is to climb the rocks and walls like some hooded assassins. Taking a deep breath, Leon glanced at the back of the poet who was walking around the main castle. If he was not afraid of this guy, how could he be more timid than a sleazy poet who liked to steal people's walls? Gritting his teeth, Leon moved closer to the wall. Since Goryard had already climbed into the courtyard once through the gaps in the bricks and stones, there was no reason why he couldn't do it. It's not like he had never played rock climbing in his previous life. How difficult could it be? Summoning up his courage and no longer paying attention to the dangerous cliffs and reefs under his feet, Leon kept himself breathing evenly, calmed down, and tried to climb up. After really starting to move, he found that it was much easier than he thought. First, the body of this boy from another world was as strong as the strong adult body in his previous life, but lighter. Second, the stone wall of the city wall seemed to be severely eroded by years of wind and rain, and the gaps that could be used to rest hands and feet were quite wide. The plank road was originally suspended in the middle of the city wall, so it didn't take much effort for Leon to finally put his hands on the castle battlements. He was glad that this wall facing the sea and facing the natural danger had no tower structure protruding from the outside. Otherwise, only a true assassin master could climb up. He carefully looked around and didn't find any castle guards from Canadar, nor any black armored guards from Aetius. I don't know if it was because of the wedding celebration in the castle, or because this place has long been regarded as a restricted area and no one disturbed it, so he was so relaxed. Leon climbed up the wall by holding onto the battlement and quickly bent down to hide. After taking a breath, he squatted and walked slowly, looking inside the wall. The location was right. It was the luxurious embassy courtyard. The flower beds and statues with unique landscapes were cleverly arranged between the road and the lawn. Before he could take in the whole picture of the courtyard, Leon suddenly heard a female voice coming from below. "Master Goliad? Is that you?" Leon shrank his neck in shock and quickly hid his head. Damn! He cursed inwardly. He didn't expect that there was someone in the blind spot just below. He really wasn't the material for being an assassin. He hadn't even sneaked in yet, and he was witnessed by someone. Oh wait, the woman seemed to be calling Goliad's name. Leon instantly breathed a sigh of relief again. Since she met the lustful poet in such a place, she probably wouldn't shout to call the guards. It was just right. Maybe I could ask for some information. Leon thought about how to negotiate and stuck his head out again. He looked at the bottom of the woman's mouth. Her brown hair was tied into a pigtail on her shoulder. Her eyes were bluer than Lohak's, and there was a teardrop mole at the corner of her eye. What does it mean to find something without any effort after searching everywhere? Although the lady's dress was no longer as disheveled as she was in the slave prison more than 2 months ago, Leon was still pleasantly surprised to recognize her gentle and memorable appearance. "Hey, excuse me, who are you?" Elena looked at the wall with some doubts and found that it was a strange boy, not the bard with a curly beard. Hearing the other party's question, Leon smiled and was not surprised that the other party did not recognize him. The original owner of this body, the boy, had been beaten all over his body long before he was imprisoned, and he died of his injuries in captivity. When he was resurrected from a dead body, his face was covered in dirt and scars, which was completely different from the now clean appearance. After more than 2 months, if this still looks the same, it's a ghost. Right now, if he hadn't seen her face clearly, Leon wouldn't be able to remember her voice. After all, the two of them didn't even exchange a word when they were in the cage. If Azarian were here, it might be easier for her to recognize the fair and handsome son of a noble. "Madam, I am Lohark's friend. I am here to rescue you." Leon lowered his voice and informed the other party of his identity. Elena, who was just confused at first, opened her eyes in disbelief when she heard her brother's name. "Lohak." Elena's shoulders trembled, and she covered her mouth, tears of surprise and excitement filling her eyes. "Are you a friend of Lohark? So, my brother is still alive? Is he doing well? Don't worry. Roark is fine now. Don't talk about it now." Leon nodded to her, feeling anxious. The target has been found. Nothing else matters now. The top priority is to evacuate immediately. "Ms. Elena, find a way to find a ladder and something for your feet." I'll pull you up and escape with me. My brother is still alive. Loark is alive. Great, great. Knowing that her only relative was safe and sound, Elena choked back her tears and sniffed. There's no better news than this. This is enough. Elena nodded and wiped her eyes. She raised her head again, tried her best to show her face, and smiled at the brave young man on the wall, her brother's friend. Thank you for coming to tell me the news about Loark, but it is impossible for me to leave. Seeing the surprised expression on the young man's face, the gentle lady cheered up. Please go back safely and tell Roark not to worry. I live a good life here. No one beats or scolds me here. I can eat well and wear warm clothes every day. Wait. What? Can't leave? Leon frowned, interrupting the other person's words, and at the same time his mind was racing. Although this lady is now wearing a beautiful dress made of luxurious fabrics, perhaps, as she said, she is well fed, clothed, and living in extraordinary living conditions in the Asius embassy. But the other party is obviously not the kind of woman who loves vanity and is willing to abandon her loved ones and commit herself to slavery. Tell me first, why can't you leave? Did some big shot threaten you? Or what happened? Leon realized that this woman must have encountered difficulties far beyond her own abilities. Hearing this inquiry, Elena couldn't help showing a bitter expression. Then, she raised her chin and exposed her neck to the boy on the wall. I saw a complex circle of red patterns attached to Elena's neck like a tattoo, like a collar that sticks to the skin. Sitting on the tiles on the roof, the young man with blonde hair and golden eyes hugged his legs and quietly looked at the distant castle courtyard, where the foreign servants were celebrating a joyous celebration. The faint sound of piano, flute, and drum beats brought Corvus's memory back to the distant past. The sea breeze blew across his face, and his blonde hair fluttered in the wind. The young man raised his face and stared blankly at the white seabirds passing by in the sky, listening to them chirping freely, spreading their wings and soaring in the blue distance. The young man couldn't help but caress his neck and rub the bright red magic lines with his fingertips. Closing his eyes, Corvus enjoyed the rare tranquility without being disturbed during the brief interval when the master left for the banquet. But the moment of relaxation was fleeting, and Corvus knew he still had work to do. As Pirieno's fan slave and half-apprentice, the boy had to help his master complete many chores every day that the other party was too lazy to waste time on. Whether it is patrolling the operation of the surrounding warning spells or replenishing the magic power of the sealing spell that is preserving the griffin eggs. Now that other Imperial mages and apprentices have gone to various places in Canadar, he is the only one who can handle these matters in the empty embassy. It's definitely not possible to count on the legionnaires outside the gate who know nothing about magic. After leaving the roof and walking out of the big house in the courtyard, the boy walked along the magic nodes set on the courtyard path. After checking the inner ring, everything is normal, then check the outer ring. Soon, along the city wall surrounding the courtyard, Corvus saw Elena's figure at the statue in the backyard as usual. In the past half-month, she has been alone here for a short while almost every day, more frequently than in the first month when she came here. It's just that today's lady, although her eyes are still red as if she had cried, her expression seems much more relaxed than usual, and her face has a little more brilliance. Even the smile, when greeting him, no longer had the usual reluctance, as if a heavy burden had been lifted from her heart. Corvus looked at Elena's back as she returned to the big house, and her mood felt better. Turn around and continue the work of checking the vigilance technique. Just when a young man walked all the way to where Elena was just now, he stopped in surprise. There seems to be something wrong with the flow of magic on the wall. He raised his hand and turned his palm towards the hidden and invisible position under the bricks of the city wall. The young man drew a circular magic light curtain, revealing the magical patterns there into his field of vision. It's not an illusion. The originally complete path of the magic pattern seemed to have been cut off, directly interrupted at its current location. Corvus was surprised and dragged the round curtain of light in front of his hand, and while walking, he searched for the location where the magic pattern originally disappeared. It wasn't until I walked far away that I saw the magic pattern port that was also cut off at the other end. Did the magic under the wall become naturally damaged due to lack of maintenance for too long? Impossible. The warning spells in the embassy courtyard were jointly arranged by many real canon mages. Those high-level magic masters are definitely not parallel imports like their master Pirieno, and it is impossible for them to commit such negligence. And Corvus remembered clearly that until he completed his patrol yesterday, the spells in the courtyard were still intact, and there was no sign of any abnormality in the magic patterns. This must be man-made. But the scene in front of him also made him feel puzzled. The already very sensitive warning magic has been so severely interfered with and distorted that even a large part of the outer circle of magic channels that maintain integrity has been missing. Then, why not only was the alarm not triggered, but the entire technique was still running well? Corvus waved his hand to disperse the light curtain that detected the magic power in front of his palm. His delicate eyebrows could not help but tighten, and he fell into deep thought. Who did it? Ms. Elena? The blond boy mentally shook his head. If that poor lady had such ability, how could she have become a gift from the nobles of Canadar to her master? Corvus raised his head and looked at the edge of the city wall that was no longer protected by magic. The young man's soul, which had been silent for many years, couldn't help but feel a bit of long-lost restlessness. Who has been here? And why did this torn gap in the technique happen to appear in the place where Elena vented her pain and spent a long time alone? Just a coincidence? Hurrying back to the celebration site outside the castle, Leon walked through the noisy celebrations and finally found Loark, who was still eagerly looking for him in the crowd. Stepping forward and grabbing his partner's arm, he couldn't help but drag him to a quiet corner. I found your sister. Rohark's pupils trembled with surprise when he heard this. That really? He almost grabbed Leon's shoulders to jump up and raised his voice uncontrollably. Is she okay? Is she injured? Where's she? Me, can I go see her? No, that's not right. Let's quickly find a way to take her away. Leon looked at his partner's extremely excited look. After he took a deep breath to calm down, he continued with a stern face. She is in the embassy of the Adius people. She looks good. At least she is well fed and clothed. I didn't see it. Your sister is injured. After speaking, he sighed and turned to tell the bad news. There's a path to see her, but it's just to see her. If you want to save people, you have to find a new way. Why? Are the guards in the courtyard of those men in black very tight? Loark looked at his companion's solemn expression and felt uneasy. The main entrance is indeed very tight, but this is not a real trouble. Otherwise, I could have rescued her just now. Leon pointed helplessly at his neck. Your sister said that she and several slaves in the embassy have been put under a terrible curse by a wizard. No matter where they go, the wizard can kill them with just a thought. Different place. Among the people who were sent to the embassy with Sister Yu, there was a slave who made a mistake and offended the other party, and had his neck cut off by the curse in front of them. Lohak opened his mouth in surprise, and his eyes widened in panic for his sister's safety. The concepts related to magic obviously exceeded the young man's cognition. He lowered his head to calm down and looked at his companions who had cast spells and exorcised demons before him. Leon, do you have a way to remove this vicious magic? Do you really think I'm a magician? Leon smiled bitterly and shook his head at him. At least now, I really can't help it. After hearing this, Roark couldn't help but feel a little depressed. He sat down on the flower bed helplessly, feeling a burst of resentment against the wizard in his heart. Leon said with relief, Don't worry. Your sister's life is definitely not in danger for the time being. Let's wait for Azarian to come back and discuss the next step together. If that doesn't work, let's find an excuse to spend money to negotiate with those men in black. Maybe we can redeem your sister. After hearing this, Roark regained his energy and nodded. Although my sister is beautiful, she is not worth a fortune. Now that Azarian is a noble of Canadar, he has close contacts with these men in black. As long as there is a suitable entry point and reason, spending money to buy people is indeed a feasible solution with a chance. No matter how much money I spend, as long as I can rescue my sister, I will definitely repay you twice as much in this life. Lohak raised his head and promised his partners very seriously. Leon patted Loark on the shoulder. If you want to pay back, just pay back Azirian's share. Forget it. Have you forgotten that your sister fed me water in the cage? I don't know where I saw this proverb. Even if it is a drop of kindness, we must repay it with a fountain. Although the lady's kind-hearted and futile act ultimately failed to save the original owner's death, Leon still silently attributed this kindness to himself. After all, it was this young man's body that was used to resurrect the corpse through time, so he had to bear the karma to a certain extent. Moreover, Elena was still the close relative of her best friend, so it was worth spending no matter how much money she spent. The noisy celebration in the castle gradually came to an end. The time after nightfall will belong exclusively to the bride and groom of this wedding. It wasn't until the celebrations of the servants outside ended and Leon returned to the room that he finally remembered the name Margarina from the bard's mouth and why it felt familiar to him. The pronunciation of this name is exactly the same as that of the bride at this wedding banquet. Now that it is mentioned frequently by people around today, it is strange that he is not familiar with it. Leon sat on the chair, waiting for Azirian to come back, and his thoughts could not help but wander during this interval. He still felt that maybe the two Miss Margarita were not the same person. This female name is very common, so it's not surprising that it happened to be the same. Maybe it was a female companion or family member of a nobleman attending the banquet. After all, bypassing the groom at the wedding ceremony and having an affair with the bride? No matter how you think about it, it's outrageous. Or is it a powerful noble like Falcon and Canadar? Does that bard's head get sold wholesale? It can be thought of the accusations made by the gangsters in Dragon Throat City and the notoriety mentioned by the Dragon Throat City Guard captain. This daring bard might actually be capable of such a ridiculous thing. Well, it seems that Ms. Elena also knows the poet. Remembering that Elena called the bard's name, thinking that she was Goliath on the wall, Leon couldn't help but froze for a moment. No. With Ms. Elena's temperament, she would definitely not develop a close friendship with that greasy old whore. Most likely, she would just have a few words with the greasy-tongued man behind the wall. Leon secretly glanced at Loark, who was silently thinking about countermeasures not far away. Decided not to tell the other party about this random connection for the time being, lest his companions be distracted and annoyed by the evil bard's entanglement with his sister. It was a pity that he did not dare to stay on the wall for too long during the day. Knowing that rescue could not be done for the time being, Leon quickly retreated without thinking of asking Ms. Elena how she knew the poet. Next time you have a chance, be sure to ask clearly. TSK, if you think about it this way, something is wrong. He leaned on the chair and frowned in thought. We only met once half a month ago, and now we meet again thousands of miles away. By chance, he pointed out the secret passage that led to the courtyard, and he also happened to know the rescue goal he was looking for. How in the world could such a coincidence happen? Before Leon could figure out the reason, Azirian also returned to the room from the end of the banquet. Sorry, I searched the hall after the banquet started, but I didn't see any servant who looked like Ms. Elena. Did you find any clues? With a slightly tired look on his face, Azirian sat down and breathed a sigh of relief, then asked his companions. It is not an easy task to be nervous all the time and pretend to be a fake identity to deal with the conversations of the surrounding nobles. Especially today, the young man was constantly being talked to by a particularly enthusiastic big shot. Just lying about his disguised life experience was enough for Azirian to rack his brains. I did find her. Leon once again carefully repeated Ms. Elena's dilemma to Azirian. The noble's son was a little excited when he heard that the rescue target was finally found. As a result, after understanding the lady's situation, I suddenly felt dizzy. It was already difficult to rescue people from the heavily guarded Aetius embassy. As a result, there is still a vicious magic blocking everyone. What should we do? Among them, except Leon, there is nothing they can do about the power that transcends cognition. In this case, I may also have good news. Azirian thought of the red-haired man who talked to him enthusiastically today and informed the two of them of today's unintentional gain. At the banquet, I unexpectedly met an Adius noble named Pirieno, who is currently the highest-ranking person in the embassy. I wonder if he is the mage who imprisoned Elena, as you mentioned. However, he seems to be very interested in investing in the identity we made up. He has been chatting with me today and also offered to help me, the son of Duzin, recruit an army to regain the territory and revive the family. As he spoke, Azarian took out an invitation letter from his arms. Before leaving, he said that you can go to the embassy to see him at any time to discuss in detail how to support my family. Originally, I thought that if Leon couldn't enter the courtyard today, I would take this opportunity to take you to the appointment and sneak in to find someone. Now it seems that we have to go there too. Leon and Roark couldn't help but be a little surprised when they heard that Azarian accidentally connected with the noble Aetius. This is really a rare breakthrough. It's a pity that I don't know what the customs of the nobles of the Arshes Empire are. After all, in the countries of the Western continent, if nobles who are not closely related to each other directly offer to spend money to redeem each other's female slaves, in most cases, it is almost the same as provocation. But if the other party is interested in investing in the sons of Dutson they made up, with this identity, Azarian might be able to take the opportunity to establish some political friendship with the other party. If everything goes well, maybe Azarian and Ms. Elena can act out a sexy drama about a noble boy falling in love at first sight with a beautiful slave girl. This was used to test whether the Adius people were willing to let go of Elena. The three of them used their imaginations to the fullest and discussed various ideas intensively in the room. The safety of his sister was the most important thing now, and Loark did not raise any objections to Leon's alternative plan that was too offensive to his late brother-in-law. He felt that the brother-in-law who loved his sister deeply, even if he was still alive, would definitely put the overall situation first at this critical moment. After chatting until late at night, Leon and Roark returned to the servants' room to sleep. Closing his eyes, Leon couldn't help but ask Miss Laura in his heart for help again, wondering if there was any way he could break the magic on Elena's neck. He knew it was difficult for the other party to answer now, but he still couldn't help but look forward to the only magic consultant he could rely on at the moment. Unfortunately, that long period of silence was Miss Mage's answer. Leon had no choice but to sleep in disappointment. It seems that apart from serving as a cannon stand for Miss Laura, I can't hope to deal with more complex magic problems. Without delay, while the wedding celebrations were only 2 days away, Azarian seized the time the next morning and took Leon and Roark, who were acting as servants, to the Aetius embassy for the appointment. Stop! This is the Imperial Embassy. No outsiders are allowed to approach it. The black armor guard at the door stopped the three of them with an arrogant expression in Urea, which was not very fluent. Following his companions as they approached the gate of the Aetius embassy, Leon was able to clearly see the foreign soldiers in front of him who had only glanced at them yesterday. They all wore diamond-topped, open-face helmets that were very different from those of the countries in the Western continent. There was no retractable visor that covered the face, but the protective parts of the armor's neck protector were raised very high, covering the bottom of the nose. The forehead of his helmet is wrapped with a band of alternate colors. The two officers-looking soldiers in the lead have symmetrical feather decorations extending from both sides of the helmet. The main body of the armor is almost the same as the breastplate of the Pharaoh people. It is black, with the iconic golden one-eye emblem on the chest. The circular baffle on the upper end of the shoulder armor stands high. The edges of the armor and some parts are golden, but it should be just some kind of paint. Paint. Leon just looked at it briefly and couldn't help but murmur in his heart. Every soldier's armor obviously has unified manufacturing standards from decoration to shape, even a number of armor pieces covering the shoulders and arms, the connecting joints, and the weapons and equipment held in hand. At first glance, these soldiers wearing heavy armor seemed to be exactly the same as clones. He didn't know if the people in front of him were the elites of the Arshes Empire. It wouldn't be unusual if there were armorers of considerable scale who specially crafted equipment for them. But if they are just the most ordinary grassroots warriors, this may mean that the distant empire may have already advanced on a civilization process that far exceeds that of the countries in the Western continent today. Elia Casoles, the son of the Baron of Leidenberg, came to attend the appointment at the invitation of His Excellency Pirieno. Azarian showed the invitation letter to the officer at the door without being humble or condescending. The leading officer carefully checked the invitation and then cast an inexplicable glance at Azarian's face. The officer raised his eyebrows, waved his hands in a playful voice, and muttered something in a foreign language that Leon and the other three could not understand to the man behind him. "Go straight into the hall and tell the servants. You will see Master Pirieno. Remember not to run around, or you will suffer the consequences." The black-armored officer gave a casual warning and opened the iron door. No one was even sent to follow them, and the guards simply put the few people into the courtyard. Walking on the smooth road, Leon looked back at the guard outside the door. He didn't know whether it was heavily guarded or loosely guarded. Except for the black-armored soldiers and tower crossbowmen at the main entrance, he didn't even see any patrolling guards in the courtyard. There were only 2 or 3 servants taking care of the garden in the distance. Are these people so assured of the protection of the city wall? Leon felt that he climbed in from outside so easily yesterday. A layman like him can sneak inside. If it were replaced by a more professional assassin, wouldn't such security be ineffective? But it's also a good thing for myself. Leon took this opportunity to look around, trying to keep the environment inside and outside the embassy building in mind. Entering the main building in the center of the embassy courtyard, the quiet front hall makes people feel more empty. Except for the maid who came to greet him, there seemed to be no one in the whole house. The master is resting upstairs. Please follow me to the reception room and wait a moment. The pretty maid bent down and extended her hand to signal, then turned around and led the way. Leon raised his eyes from behind her and aimed at the other person's neck. Not surprisingly, he also saw a red magic pattern on the other person's neck. The female slave took everyone into the reception room and left to inform her master. The short wait made Loark feel extremely long. He was restless and eager to see his long-separated relatives as soon as possible. But at this moment, he had to endure the opportunity of reunion that was just around the corner. Fortunately, it didn't take long for footsteps to be heard outside the door. A red-haired man wearing an exquisite black robe, his face glowing red, pushed open the door and entered. As soon as he came in, his face was filled with a kind smile, and he looked at Azarian, who stood up and saluted. "Oh, Alea, my friend, you are welcome to be my guest. It's so nice to see you again." Pirieno opened his hand, enthusiastically stepped forward to hug Azarian, and even bowed his head to give the aristocratic boy a Chow-laden style face-to-face salute. He kissed the air with 2 numb sounds. Azarian was also not used to the other party's friendly and eager attitude, and his face was pricked a little uncomfortable by the other party's beard. But now, regardless of his pretended identity or his true purpose, it was hard to offend the other party, so the young man had no choice but to hug back and accept the other party's intimate greeting. Leon looked on, surprised that his partner had already developed such a good relationship with this Aetius man that he was like a close friend in just 1 day of negotiation yesterday. He secretly admired the strong social skills of the noble son. Now that the relationship is so friendly, maybe they can actually implement the redemption plan they considered before. "I'm deeply grateful for your proposal yesterday. I am here today to discuss the details of the cooperation with you on behalf of my family." Azarian smiled reluctantly and took a step back, trying hard to get rid of the other party's embrace. It was really difficult to cope with the other party's exaggerated attitude. Okay, of course we have to talk carefully. It is my duty to help friends in trouble. Sir Alea, you don't have to leave today. My place is quite big, and there are many rooms. If you're tired talking, just go to bed. No problem, Pirieno patted the noble boy on the shoulder with a smile. Then thank you for your warm hospitality. Azarian nodded politely and said gratefully. The next conversation between the two sounded a little unsatisfactory to Leon on the side. The identity and situation that Azarian is currently pretending to be are just made up to deceive people. No matter how in-depth and detailed the conversation with this man, named Pirieno, it is just an unrealistic lie with no possibility of implementation. Leon and others could only wait silently for the opportunity to encounter Ms. Elena. Soon, the conversation between Sue and Wei Shi came to an end. Pirieno stood up and invited Azarian to have lunch. Leon and Roark were naturally not qualified to sit down as servants now, so they waited outside the door together. The female slaves entered the dining room carrying trays of various sizes. The two of them scanned the faces. After a while, Lohak's eyes narrowed, and he clenched his hands with excitement, his palms trembling slightly, and his heart almost jumped out of his throat. He finally saw the relative he had been missing for 2 months. Elena was holding the dinner plate and froze on the spot when she saw the face of her long-separated brother. It was not until the maid behind her urged her in confusion that the lady woke up as if from a dream. With a rosy face, she endured the excitement and quickened her pace to follow the team to deliver the sumptuous lunch to the restaurant. Elena, who placed the freshly prepared food on the dining table, was so focused on being reunited with her loved ones that she didn't even notice that Azarian, who was sitting down, was also an acquaintance. She just observed the etiquette and stood on either side with the other female slaves, happily recalling how her brother looked safe and sound just now. Elena did not recognize the noble son, but Azarian clearly recognized her. Surprised that he finally met the target of his trip, the aristocratic boy changed his mind and immediately showed his absent-mindedness while chatting with Pirieno. He frequently cast his eyes on Ms. Elena in front of Pirieno. Azarian plays the role of a heartwarming young boy, just to pave the way for what I will say later. Pirieno naturally noticed that the noble boy in front of him was constantly distracted. Seeing this handsome young man stealing at his slave girl with a look of admiration on his face, he didn't feel displeased at all. "Your Excellency Elia, you seem to like my slave very much?" Pirieno raised his glass and teased meaningfully. Hearing this, Azarian pretended to be confused and immature. I'm sorry. Your Excellency Pirieno, it's just that your maid amazes me." Pirieno waved his hand with a smile. He never minded sharing happiness with those close to him. Not to mention that the handsome young man with extraordinary temperament in front of him was also his target. Haha, it doesn't matter. If you like it, I will let Elena goes to bed with you. Elena, who had been immersed in her own world, raised her head in surprise. Somehow, the nobles at the table mentioned her name, waiting for guests. The lady, who had escaped humiliation for so many days, couldn't help but feel panicked again. She looked at the aristocratic young man on the table, but when she saw the vaguely familiar face clearly, Elena couldn't help but be stunned. Azarian turned his head to the side, avoiding Pirieno's eyes, and winked at Ms. Elena desperately. The memory of the cage came to mind. Elena realized something and quickly lowered her head to hide her surprise. She understood everything about the boy who claimed to be her brother's friend yesterday, the figure of Loark just now, and the familiar young nobleman now. Loark and his friends were obviously still trying to rescue her. Azarian breathed a sigh of relief. He was afraid that Ms. Elena would show a familiar reaction to him. Now everyone is in a dragon's den, and if the performance goes wrong, not only Ms. Elena, but also the three of them will be ruined. Your Excellency is so kind, I really don't know how to repay your kindness. Azarian turned around again, looking grateful to Pirieno, but he did not immediately make a request to redeem the slaves. If he acted more eagerly now, it would appear that he was pushing too far and was unseemly, which would arouse suspicion. The boy knew that he would never really touch his best friend's sister anyway. Just spend tonight, review the script and lines of Love and Love with Elena in the room, and perform a small love scene the next day. When the time comes to spend money to redeem the object of admiration you fall in love with at first sight, everything will fall into place. Azarian thought, since the other party was so enthusiastic about helping the family of the son of a down-and-out noble, and he was optimistic about this future political investment, he would not be stingy about the value of a mere slave. Haha, you're welcome. Your friendship with me is naturally the best repayment. The smile on Pirieno's face became even bigger. He clapped his hands and ordered to the slaves, "You all go out first. Don't trouble me while I'm alone with your distinguished guest." The servants bowed and left one after another. After they all left the restaurant, Pirieno picked up the wine glass again. Facing this handsome young man whose family has fallen into disrepute, he is given a great favor of support and hospitality. So what happens next? Narrowing his eyes, Pirieno launched a real test to the young man. Since Alea is also so interested in romance, I wonder if you have had a partner before? Outside the house, Leon and Loark watched the maids walk out of the restaurant one after another. Elena deliberately fell last in front of the door of the main corridor. When others were not paying attention, she carefully turned around and pointed to her brother and the boy to the back of the courtyard outside the house. Leon understood the hint. He recalled the location of the courtyard and roughly knew that she was probably referring to the secluded corner where they met yesterday. So he turned around and waved to Loark, motioning to follow. Lohak, who could no longer bear the feeling of reunion, immediately suppressed the excitement of rushing over and followed his sisters back from a distance, all the way out of the embassy building. After twisting and turning, avoiding distracting eyes and ears, he came to the statue in the backyard. Loark hugged his tearful relatives. "Sorry, sister. I came too late." The tall young man had tears in his eyes, and his voice was trembling for fear that he was dreaming. Hugging her only relative tightly, Irina rested her head on her brother's shoulder, crying and smiling at the same time, and patted his back gently. "It's okay, as long as you're okay. It's okay if my sister sees that you're still alive. It's good. It's more important than anything else." Without disturbing the reunion of the siblings after crossing the separation of life and death, Leon leaned against the statue to watch the wind to prevent others from approaching. Whether Ms. Elena can be successfully rescued now depends on the news from Azarian. Unable to deal with the vicious curse, he and Roark did not dare to act rashly. "Sister, listen to me. I am now a Knight of Orland. I still have a territory. After we find a way to remove the damn curse on your neck and rescue you, we can live together in Orland." Luo Huck wiped his eyes and said solemnly to the relatives in front of him. Unexpectedly, Elena smiled bitterly with a sad face. "Sister, please, little Mustang, I am very satisfied to see you alive and well again. Look, isn't my sister living a good life? And these brave friends of yours, how could you do such risky things for me? That wizard can control the wind and reign like a god. He is very scary. Once you offend him, you will definitely die." Loark shook his head and introduced his companions with great trust in his sister. "That bastard knows how to do witchcraft. Leon can do it too. Even the devil is not Leon's opponent. So what does that red-haired ghost mean? Shit, don't worry, sister. We will definitely find a way to get you out." Leon tilted his head, dumbfounded by this boy's inexplicable confidence. "Are you a spellcaster? So you destroyed the spell here." A calm young man's voice reached Leon's ears from a very close distance. Leon was so shocked that he immediately turned back and reflexively touched the dagger hidden in his arms. But when he looked in front of where the sound came from, he saw nothing. He had been watching his surroundings vigilantly and didn't notice anyone approaching at all. Now he even wondered if he was hearing hallucinations. But Loark obviously heard the sound. The tall young man hurriedly turned around to protect his sister behind him, looking for the source of the sound. Likewise, Loark found nothing. The two suddenly fell into tension. But Elena is very familiar with this voice that she has known for a long time. "Corvus, are you here?" she asked quickly. "Don't be afraid, it's me." As soon as he finished speaking, a dizzying distortion of light appeared in the air in front of everyone. A handsome young man with blonde hair and golden eyes appeared out of thin air. Corvus smiled at Elena, and then looked at Leon again with his golden eyes. "Did you destroy the warning spell here?" Corvus repeated his question again. There was a hint of expectation in the voice. Staring at the handsome boy who seemed to appear out of thin air from the optical camouflage and spoke fluent Faru, Leon had a lot of questions in his mind. Alert spell? Since the other party showed this superpower of invisibility, he was obviously a magic caster. Then what he was referring to was naturally some kind of spell that could be understood literally. But Leon knew that he had no idea what the so-called destruction of the spell was. He didn't rush to answer, but asked back, "Are you from this Aetius embassy?" The blond boy looked at Leon carefully, and the tiny expectation in his eyes gradually disappeared. But he still nodded, pulled down his collar, and showed the mark on his neck. I am a slave of Pilieno, but don't be nervous. I have no ill will towards you. Leon looked at his magic pattern that was the same as Elena's. This boy was also a slave imprisoned by a spell. The truth is probably as he claimed. Otherwise, if he really had malicious intentions, he would not have to show up in front of him. These guys who can cast spells are really beyond common sense. Fortunately, they are not enemies for the time being. Leon breathed a sigh of relief and then answered the other party's question. I don't know what you mean by the warning spell, but no matter who did it, it was not me. After hearing his clear denial, although Corvus had already made a judgment in his heart, he was still a little disappointed. You are not Canadars, so the purpose of coming here is just to rescue Ms. Elena? The blond boy turned and continued to ask, Did you hear everything I said just now? Lohak was annoyed that he had revealed the identities of the three people without any investigation. Elena couldn't help but pull her brother's sleeve. Corvus is my friend. He has been helping me these days. He won't harm us. As Ms. Elena said, I don't want to reveal your identity. The blond boy turned and said regretfully, But I still want to advise you not to give away your life and Elena's life in vain. You misunderstood, friend. Leon heard the words and explained to the boy who seemed friendly for the time being, I know your master. I mean that the wizard named Pilieno may be very powerful, but we don't intend to take Elena away by force. My partner has established some political friendship with Pilieno and is trying to buy Elena's personal freedom. Politics. Friendship. The blond boy was stunned when he heard this word. Recalling the fantasies and dirty talk Pilieno had about a handsome young nobleman he had just fallen in love with in the room last night, the young man couldn't help but laugh out loud. Puff, hee, yes. Sorry, I'm rude. Your partner. Do you mean the noble son who came here with you today? Leon saw the strange sneer on the young man's face, and his shoulders were shaking with joy, and he couldn't help but frown. What? This plan is ridiculous. Looking at the other party's inexplicable reaction, he secretly had a bad premonition. No. If, as you said, the noble son can establish some kind of friendship with my master, maybe he can redeem Ms. Elena. The blond boy took a deep breath to stop laughing. He shook his head, calmed down again, and pointed to his neck. But are you going to let Elena leave with this shackle? As he said, Corvus looked at Lohak and said, You just claim to be a knight of Orland. In this case, the identity of the Lord Elia Cassols is also forged. In this way, even if you temporarily please my master and take Elena away from here, if Pilieno finds out that you have played a trick on him later, Elena's life and death in the future will all depend on his mood. You mean, even if Pilieno releases Elena, he will not be willing to remove the curse on his neck? Leon asked. It's not a question of willingness or not. It's that it can't be done at all. At least, Pilieno certainly can't do it. The blond boy's eyes revealed a little bitterness. That as far as I know, there's only one way to remove the blood oath cursed. That is the death of the swearer. In the living room, Azirian was frightened by the explicit hint of the man behind him, and his fair face became even more pale. Feeling an indescribable nausea on his shoulder, he stood up suddenly, stepped back with a chill on his back, and almost wanted to run away immediately. The noble boy was instinctively nervous, feeling as if he had become a lamb that had strayed into a tiger's den. Haha, it seems that my attitude is a little anxious and scared you, Aaliyah. Pilieno turned around with the back of the chair, chuckling at the cute reaction of the handsome boy. He was not in a hurry, so he just let the other party escape to the door. After all, it was still on the territory of the Cantartars. No matter how much he looked down on the barbaric country on this continent, directly forcing a son of a Cantartar noble, even if he was just a noble boy from a poor family, was undoubtedly an insult to the ruler of this land. Pilieno did not want to face the simultaneous blame of the Empire and the Cantartars for such a trivial matter. Besides, it was much more fun to subdue a noble and beautiful boy than to use rough and direct means. I know, I have to. I never thought that this is too ridiculous between men. The panicked Azarian was no longer as calm as before. He even stuttered and couldn't find the order of words when he spoke. "I can give you time to think about it." Pirieno stepped forward with an ambiguous tone and reached out to lift the boy's chin. "But if you refuse in the end, then I will have to reconsider funding and support. You don't want to never have the chance to regain your father's title and territory, right?" Although he had read about the behavior of good men in aristocratic circles from books, he personally experienced this unconventional and insulting thing. The chill that spread from his heels to the top of his head made Azarian shudder. Recalling the warm, face-to-cheek greeting when he first arrived, he could no longer hold back the nausea in his stomach. "Your Excellency, please forgive me and let me think about it." The young man twisted his head to break away from the contact, shouted, pushed the door open, and ran away. The son of a nobleman, who had always considered himself brave, had never felt so helpless as now. He just wanted to get away from that salty man with terrifying eyes as soon as possible. Finding the two companions in the courtyard, Azarian fled back to Leon and the two, angrily wanting to repay Pirieno for his previous misjudgment of his friendly attitude. "Let's talk about it when we get back." Seeing the embarrassed look in his partner's eyes, Leon stopped Azarian for the time being. He was now convinced that what the blonde boy said before was true. That Asius man was so enthusiastic about Azarian, not for political investment at all. The real reason was so dirty. The three people hurriedly left the embassy and returned to the guest room in the west area of the castle. After carefully exchanging the information obtained from each other, the atmosphere suddenly became dull again. Not to mention the embarrassing dilemma Azarian encountered. Just the enslavement on Ms. Irina's neck that even the caster could not break made them helpless. To take a step back, even if they reluctantly sacrificed their partner's Guzzi in exchange for the opportunity to redeem Elena. But even after taking Rohak's sister and escaping to the ends of the earth, Pirieno, who realized that he had been fooled, still had only one thought, and Ms. Elena would immediately move her head. Such a result of life and death being in the hands of the other party is unacceptable to the three of them no matter what. Considering the current situation, Leon knew that there was only one way before everyone. Kill him. Pirieno must be killed. There is no other way. But facing off against a legendary magician, Leon rubbed his temples with a frown. He has a deep understanding of how powerful the magic in this world is. The arrow of Isha, which is powerful enough to have large-caliber bullets, has saved his life twice in danger. This is just a so-called little magic that Miss Laura said is not worth mentioning. What is the power of a more powerful spell? And even if we don't talk about Miss Laura, who is not very good at herself, the whirlwind magic displayed by Count Tras's warlock advisor, and the invisibility magic displayed by the blonde boy today, also weird and unpredictable. And according to what the young man named Corvus said, in Arshas, apart from apprentices, spellcasters who can usually be called magicians have 3 official evaluation titles given by the Imperial Mage Society from low to high. They are Right Position, Canon Position, and Magic Guide. If only Corvus hadn't been bragging. Anyone who is not a pure scholar-type spellcaster who specializes in academic research, as long as he is a regular mage and is well prepared, can easily kill several or even a dozen powerful heavy-armored warriors in a direct armed conflict. And Pirieno is the canon above this. As expected, he possesses terrifying magic power that is enough to tear apart a small army of ordinary people. Although Corvus also admitted that Pirieno's title is full of water. If he had not paid bribes for many years in the Imperial Mage Society, he would not have been awarded the title of canon. But even so, as a high-level mage close to a true canon, he is by no means a being that the 3 of Leon can fight against. That, not from the front. What about the one who comes to eat? Poisoning food. Assassinate when you are resting and unprepared? Leon once again regretted that before hanging Boris, he was so focused on territorial affairs that he actually forgot where the incense that the interrogation village ruffian had originally obtained were obtained. Thinking about it later, Boris on the gallows had already been beaten to pieces with stones by the angry villagers. He raised his hands and silently gestured with the seal of Isha's arrow. Can you hit him from a distance and snipe him while he's not paying attention? Just as Leon and his partners were thinking hard about the feasibility of the assassination plan, there was a sudden knock on the door. Sir Aleya, can I come in? The three people in the room looked at the door unexpectedly. Azarian was a little confused. He had never heard this voice. But Leon could tell that it looked like the slave boy from the previous embassy was outside. Just in case, Leon and Roark stood up and reacted before opening the locked door. The person who came was indeed the blonde boy. It's just different from the cool dress he wore before, wearing a white tunic. He came to visit now, wearing a black cloak and a hood covering his head, covering himself tightly. It doesn't look like he wants to hide his identity. After all, with such an airtight appearance, his appearance stood out among the crowd in the castle. Excuse me. Corvus walked in without any politeness, raised his hand, closed the door and locked it, as if he was no longer an outsider. Azarian looked surprised. Who are you? Leon quickly introduced this trusted friend of Ms. Elena to his partners. After explaining Corvus's identity, Leon looked at him and asked with some surprise, "You can actually enter and exit the embassy freely?" So many years of obedience and patience have finally paid off. In Pirieno's eyes, I am as well-behaved as a pet. As Corvus answered, he put the arm that stretched out the cloak back into his robe. He tightened the cloak in front of his body, and then found an empty chair and sat down in front of everyone. When I learned that His Excellency Aleya rejected my master, I gave him a reason and said that I would help him to persuade him. After all, my face should be more dignified than Pirieno's appearance. Be more convincing. The blond boy lowered his eyes and laughed at himself. Indeed, Leon thought, this young man was so handsome that it was hard to distinguish between male and female, even more handsome than Azarian. I don't know how many weird ants he could have made scream in his previous life. But now that he knew about Pirieno's evil habits, he could only feel great sympathy for this dear friend. It was hard to imagine how he survived. In a world where the jungle prevails, and there is no strong order or moral restraint, and you have no power to protect yourself, looking good is often not a good thing. This is the same for both men and women. Leon couldn't help but feel lucky that his skin was ordinary. Then you came to us. Do you have any advice? Leon faintly realized that this young man who had been bound by a curse for many years seemed to have never really given up the opportunity to be free. Let me see your determination. Determination? Yes, if you have given up on the difficulties, I will naturally not put my slim hope on you anymore. The blond boy replied calmly. Are you willing to help us? Roark listened and felt a little surprised. Compared to the wild speculations of the three of them, if the person in front of Pirieno who knows him well and is beside him betrays him, the probability of the plan succeeding is undoubtedly much higher. This is not only helping you, but also helping myself. But before that, it depends on how far you can go. The blond boy was noncommittal. Wait, with all due respect, since you have endured for so many years and gained his trust, haven't you ever tried to find an opportunity to kill him? Leon asked again in confusion. He didn't want to offend the other party, but when it came to the chance of assassination, it was obvious that the intimate relationship between the beds was the one with the greatest chance of surprise. Of course I haven't tried it, because countless slaves have already learned bloody lessons with their lives. Sadness flashed in Corvus's eyes, and he explained to the three people in front of him, how long do you think it would take to completely eliminate the consciousness of an ordinary person using ordinary means such as swords, bows, and crossbows? And how long will it take for the idea of activating the blood oath to flash through the minds of the mages? Swords and crossbows, poisons and incense, assassinations and tricks are all common among the intrigues among Arsha's mages. And this method, which is fatal to ordinary people, is still difficult to break through the defense methods that the mages put in place day and night. It is even more ridiculous to kill Pirieno instantly before he can react and activate the blood oath. Leon frowned and grasped the key point of his words. A defense method that increases day and night? Does he even have magic to protect his body while sleeping? What? Are you planning to assassinate him while he is resting? Corvus sighed helplessly and then asked, although I don't have high hopes for you, is it really not you who destroyed the warning magic in the courtyard? Leon had no choice but to clarify again, and without hesitation he sold the suspicious poet who guided him to the secret passage. Didn't I tell you before, if we really want to pursue it, the bard who was invited to the wedding banquet is the one who more suspicious. Elena also said that the person she saw during this period was Jailard, who had been lying on the wall telling stories to coax her. The blond boy mentioned that the magic in that place had been tampered with. Since it was not him, Leon could not think of anyone else besides Goliad. The blond boy shook his head. I searched carefully before I came here, and the Philcon family did not invite the poet named Jailard to the banquet at all. As for the castle servants who manage reception and accommodation, they have not seen any bards wearing red trousers and 2 mustaches during this time. Leon raised his eyebrows when he heard this. Well, that guy really sneaked in just like me and the others. He wondered how someone could invite such a wicked poet to a banquet at his son's wedding. No wonder Galiad knew about the hidden plank roads and cracks in the city wall outside. Maybe that was the route he took to get in. To be honest, do you care so much about the person who destroyed your so-called warning magic? Do you think he's more likely to help you kill Pirieno? Leon somewhat understood why the other party was obsessed with this. Of course, since one has such profound magical attainments, it is impossible not to use powerful attack spells. As long as he seizes the opportunity of Pirieno's lax defense, such a spellcaster will definitely have a way to kill him instantly. Corvus, he nodded and admitted that he had been looking forward to getting strong help from the outside world for many years. You just said that a wizard like Pirieno is protected by magic even when sleeping. So what is the chance of slacking off that you are referring to? Azirian listened silently and suddenly asked with a sense of something bad. The blond boy smiled inexplicably, then turned to look at the son of the noble who looked uneasy. Just as you think. For Pirieno, only at a certain time will he temporarily remove some of his defensive spells. Otherwise, how can he enjoy the pleasure of touch? Azirian looked at Corvus's strange eyes, and suddenly his whole body tensed up in fear. Poisoning was the first ineffective plan that Corvus talked him out of. Not to mention that Leon and others couldn't get a poison that could kill people quickly. Even if it could be obtained, it would not be very effective. Even Corvus had been taught various detoxification techniques, and it was impossible for Pirieno not to be proficient in this. If I can destroy his head instantly, are you sure he doesn't have any other weird ways to save his life? Leon asked in a deep voice, giving up the unrealistic heresy. Also, are you sure that when Pirieno is thinking about that thing, he will really remove his defenses? Is his body strong? I have seen an enemy whose skin is magically strengthened, even if he is naked. Everyone's lives were at stake, and the enemy was the mysterious master, so he had to be cautious. Who knows if those mages will really die after losing their heads? Miss Laura doesn't even have a body now, so she's still alive and kicking in her consciousness. Corvus looked at Leon. What do you want to do? Let me remind you first, if you want to use a blunt weapon like a warhammer, save it. Even if there's a chance to get close, he will definitely be able to recover the defensive magic faster than you can swing it. The weapons are faster, and I don't think you have extraordinary martial arts skills. I know an attack spell that can be projected, which is powerful enough to penetrate the knight's plate armor, but I can't show it to you just to make you believe it, because it can only be released once in a short period of time. They were all honest with each other. At this point, Leon is not afraid of further confession. Seriously? The blond boy narrowed his eyes. He had previously denied the warning-breaking spell, but now he claimed to be able to cast it. This was something he didn't expect. Corvus pondered for a while, and then assured, according to my observations over the years, when Pirieno takes off his guard, his body will not be much stronger than ordinary people. He does not follow the school of thought that transforms the body. If you can really smash his head in an instant, it's not impossible to try. The question is, even if it is powerful enough, how far is the range of your spell? What is the accuracy? How fast is the projection speed? You won't have the opportunity to get up close and personal with him like I did when he lowered his defenses. After all, your appearance doesn't interest Pirieno. Corvus asked while holding his chin, as if he was really considering the possibility of the incident happening. The accuracy can be guaranteed, but I don't know the specific range. Having said that, don't you know any attack spells yourself? When talking about this, Leon couldn't help but wonder. The invisibility spell that the other party had revealed earlier was not as weak as he appeared to be. Unfortunately, I really don't know how. Pirieno only taught me the magic tricks to assist him. I know some protection, healing, spell breaking, purification, etc., but he forbids me to have any knowledge about combat magic. Corvus shook his head. As he spoke, he took out his left hand from his cloak, turned to face the vase on the table next to him, and dexterously drew imaginary patterns with his fingertips, muttering something in a low voice. The young man drew several streams of light with his fingers, forming a circle of small seals. The air shook with a bang. The vase was shot out of thin air in the eyes of Leon and others. But the moment before it hit the wall, it stopped in the air. Corvus pulled back. The floating vase flew back to the blond boy with a swish. He raised his palm and whispered words that no one could understand. Then, the flowing light seal floating in his palm disappeared immediately. The vase then fell freely from midair and was caught firmly by the young man's hand. If a battle really breaks out, I can only use this little trick to increase my efforts throwing things around. I am good at swordsmanship, but the martial arts of ordinary people are no different from juggling to Pirieno. Weiss put the vase back on the table and looked at Leon helplessly. The greatest help I can do is to use this body to make him relax his guard and create opportunities for you to attack. That's enough. Leon nodded and told himself and others that with so much useful information, the other party had done everything they could. He then began to ask the blond boy in detail about the structure of the entire embassy, looking for a suitable place to start. Corvus immediately fiddled with the wine glasses and vases on the table, explaining the structural distribution of the courtyard buildings and the warning spells still operating in the courtyard. Several people deduced and discussed for a long time. And I eliminated all kinds of plans with too many uncertainties. In the end, only one assassination plan that was truly stable and possible was discussed. That is, from inside the building, through the bedroom door, release the arrow of ISA and shoot Pirieno's head at close range. Only when Pirieno is completely relaxed in the bedroom does he really let down some of his guard. The difficulty in trying to snipe from the outside is that in order not to trigger the warning in the courtyard and release attack magic, the only sniping position Leon can choose is the small area where someone has destroyed the structure of the spell. But Pirieno's room didn't have a window facing there. Leon didn't have clairvoyance, so it was impossible to shoot blindly through the thick walls of the stone castle building. Even if there's a window, he can't guarantee that he can accurately shoot the arrow of Isha through the window and hit the target's head from a distance like a sniper. If Pirieno is allowed to feel that his life is in danger, the three of Leon will have to bear the wrath of a cannon mage. But for the indoor assassination, after repeated thinking, the plan still had several uncertainties. That is, there is no 100% guarantee that Pirieno will be led into the bedroom by the blond boy to remove his defense state according to their action time. Although according to Corvus, the other party did ask for more from him during this period. But what if Pirieno is not interested when the action is taken? It is not a big deal if the assassination cannot be carried out. It is nothing more than picking another time. But if Leon, who sneaked into the building, is discovered by him, he will be dead. Although, asking Ms. Elena to help confirm the situation and then notify Leon, who is on standby over the wall, to take action is a solution. But Pirieno's temperament is unpredictable. What if Ms. Elena is pulled by that guy to sleep with her when she confirms the situation in the room? Without the insider, Leon will most likely miss the brief opportunity when Corvus lures the target behind the door. If the opportunity is missed, even if he can sneak into the door of the target's room, Leon will not be able to guess the enemy's position through the door and blindly snipe the target's head. If Pilieno really dragged Corvus and Elena to bed, he would have to give up the assassination to avoid accidentally hitting friendly forces and even humiliated Ms. Elena. Scratching his hair, Leon fell into deep thought, regretting that he did not have a radio communication device, and Corvus did not know the magic of voice transmission effect in martial arts novels. The two sides could not communicate during the action, and it was really a fantasy to want to cooperate perfectly. "Let me do it," Azirian on the side sighed helplessly. Hearing this, Leon and Lohak looked at him awkwardly. In this heated discussion, the two of them avoided talking about the partner targeted by Pilieno. After all, facing such an embarrassing thing, the two were really embarrassed to let Azirian take the lead and risk himself. This is different from other dangers. Leon believed that the three of them would not frown for each other's affairs and go through fire and water for each other. But if the operation is not done well, the crisis faced by the partner is not only the safety of life, but also the reputation and dignity of Azirian. Some dignity is more important than life. Forget it. Let's think of another way, such as going to the slave market in this city or going to the brothel to see if we can find someone as handsome as you. Lohak couldn't bear to let his partner go into the devil's den again and couldn't help but make a whimsical suggestion. Lohak's eyes were full of shame. To be honest, the boy regretted that he didn't have a partner like this. Otherwise, he would have done it himself. In order to save his sister, Lohak was willing to take any risks, but the fact is that there are thresholds for selling brothels, and it is really not something that Lohak's face can handle. "What's with that look, you idiot? What are you thinking about?" Azirian pushed Lohak's head with laughter, and then he continued to explain with a smile, "I've thought about it. Only if I act as bait can the uncontrollability of this plan be minimized. Since that guy is so interested in me, I just need to pretend to accept it, and he will definitely enter the bedroom at the time I ask. At the same time, Leon doesn't have to take the risk of climbing over the wall to sneak in and can stay overnight in the embassy as my follower. I can even find a reason for Leon to wait outside the door of Pilieno and take action after my signal. Don't think too much. I'm not really going to sell my ass." Speaking of this, Azirian paused and looked at the blond boy with an apologetic face. "I'm sorry for my words. I didn't mean to offend." Corvus shook his head calmly. "It's okay, but you are right. You are more suitable to be the bait. For me, I can't think of a reason to trick Pilieno to the door for the time being. You can take this opportunity to lure him behind the door with a reaction of retreating at the last minute, creating an attack opportunity for Leon." After speaking, the blond boy smiled at Azirian. "Don't worry, I will act with you. If Pilieno really makes a move on you, I can also respond flexibly and help you cover and delay. Then I'll trouble you, my friend." Azirian nodded. It would be a lie for the noble boy to say that he was not afraid. He was not afraid of death, but he was afraid of dishonorable loss of purity and shame for his family and his deceased father. Looking at the sacrifices made by his good brother for him, Lohak was so grateful that he could not express it in words. He secretly noted down these unrepayable favors and then looked at everyone. "What about me? Is there anything I can do?" "Of course, and it's very important." Leon patted his shoulder and told him the last step of the plan. Once the assassination is successful, everyone must escape from this troubled place as soon as possible. It is impossible to run away from the main gate with Ms. Elena. The group of black-armored soldiers who guard day and night are not blind. They will not let a few outsiders take 2 slaves to leave the embassy freely. In this way, the only escape route is the secret plank road behind the city wall. After finalizing the process of the entire plan and the backup plan for the worst case, the blond boy left the residence of the 3 people with this opportunity he had been seeking for many years with inexplicable emotions in his heart, and used good news to fool Pilieno. By the way, Elena was also prepared to cooperate in escaping. Leon did not waste time and immediately found a reason to temporarily leave the castle with Lohak. The two of them quietly took a detour and searched from the deserted beach far away from human habitation to the coastal side of the castle's high cliff. After searching for a long time and running along the beach until their shoes were soaked, They finally saw the end of the plank road hidden behind the reef on the shallow beach, hanging in the air more than 1 person high. Several rotten ropes hung at the end of the plank road, swaying in the sea breeze. The escape route is feasible. The two were overjoyed and immediately rushed back to the castle. After packing all the necessary luggage for everyone, Lohak took back their horses and weapons from the outer area and left with everything. Only when night fell would he lead the horse to the cliff behind the castle to meet everyone. All preparations were made. With a nervous mood, Azirian took Leon and set foot on the Aetius embassy again. After the notification, they saw Pilieno's disgusting old face again. The noble boy couldn't help but tighten his heartstrings, burying the murderous intent in his heart in an awkward smile of hypocrisy. On the sea-facing side of the towering main castle, in a high-rise luxurious room that served as a wedding room, the beautiful bride was alone in the empty room, fidgeting and pacing back and forth. "Why are you so anxious, my little swan?" The poet, dressed in torn bright clothes, hummed an inexplicable song. He sat on the stone pillar guardrail of the balcony, leaning against the outer wall, enjoying the sea breeze. Margarina stopped and came to the balcony, looking at the bard with worried eyes. "Master, I'm just still worried about Larian. He has never sailed a boat. If he doesn't know the reefs tonight, he will be in danger. The sea breeze will protect him, and the moonlight will guide him. Don't worry." The poet stopped playing the piano, and his eyes, full of melancholy and smile, turned to look at the ill-fated little swan in front of him. "As long as your hearts are still in tune with each other, fate will eventually lead you to the other side of freedom." Then the poet took off his hat, covered his face with it, and yawned. "Have a good rest. Freedom requires more than just faith. After tonight, you will no longer be Miss Margarina of the Saline family. There will be many more tests waiting for you in the days ahead. Thank you for your help, Master Goliad." Margarina stepped forward with red eyes. Not only was she grateful for the poet's protection of her chastity from the son of Falcon, she was also excited that she could finally be with the person she loved. "That I only help those who help themselves. You help yourself." After saying that, Goliad closed his eyes, turned over lazily, and lay down along the fence. The poet felt a little relieved. This time someone did it for him, and he enjoyed the fruits of his labor. He didn't have to perform on stage himself. The afterglow of dusk burned the clouds into a fiery red color. The wings, soaring in the sky, gradually fell from the sky. First the hind hooves landed on the ground, and then the 2 eagle talons in front also fell to the ground. The flapping wings were folded, the elegant eagle head fluttered its feathers happily, and the ponytail behind it also swung a few times. The young man in black robes, holding a wand, turned over from the back of the hippogriff and landed on the horse's saddle. After adjusting his robe, he looked to the north and estimated the distance. It should be not far from the western port. After finally completing his mission and returning for the nomadic country of the barbarians in the south, he couldn't wait to meet his mentor as soon as possible to report the results. It was just that after a long journey, both he and the hippogriff he was riding needed to take a rest for a night. He took out the bottle containing the magic materials from his arms, shook out some dust, and fell on the ground. The man in black robe then raised his hand and raised the staff, chanting a mantra. The head of the staff, wrapped in crystals, was swung down, tapping the powder on the ground. There was a slight trembling sound in the air. The magic reaction along the constructed spell activated the small group of material, and the particles in the dust immediately showed light, instantly spreading from the center, forming a hazy cordon around it. The fluorescent circle formed by the powder gradually faded away, and the man took temporary warning measures before walking to the side of the resting hippogriff and sitting on the ground. Holding the long staff across his lap, he tried to meditate. But perhaps because he was about to meet his long-lost mentor, the man had not yet entered a state of calm rest. Especially, the figure of the extremely annoying blonde boy always flashed in his mind. He is nothing but a lowly slave whose country and family have perished. Thinking of the guy who now occupied his past position, he gritted his teeth. After all, The Minter is not a real good man. Although the relationship between master and apprentice is still close for many years, the Minter has no longer been interested in him since he has exceeded the age limit and his physical signs have become more obvious. It made him jealous of the blonde boy's damn youthful appearance. Sooner or later, you will lose the teacher's favor. Sooner or later, I will kill you. He murmured and tightened his grip on the wand in his hand. At sunset, night falls. Kenadar Western Port, inside the Arsh's embassy. Leon tried hard to keep his expression calm, his eyes level, his eyes as usual, and he was unsmiling. After changing into the clothes requested by Pirieno, Azarian huddled on the sofa, pulled the cloak wrapped around him, and looked helplessly at his friend who was pretending to be calm. You can laugh if you want, but you have to swear that you will never tell anyone what happened today. Azarian tightened his cloak with an embarrassed look on his face. You have to keep this secret. He now understood why Corvus had wrapped himself tightly in a robe when he came to find them. If anyone saw him wearing this outfit, Azarian would probably draw his sword and kill himself immediately. I will never tell anyone else a word about today. This will be a secret more important than my life. Leon swore seriously. There is no way. The sacrifice I made today is indeed too great. Are you ready? Corvus' urging knock sounded outside the door. Here he comes, Leon responded, and then gave Azarian the last instruction. As long as his head is stably positioned on the pattern on the door panel, you knock on the door 3 times, 1 softly and 2 hard. But remember, you must not stand up at that time to avoid accidental injury. Azarian nodded heavily and silently, took a deep breath, and remembered this important code that related to his life and reputation in his heart. The two stood up and opened the door. The blonde boy outside was also dressed like an exotic dancer. At first glance, she really looked like a beautiful girl, but her plain breasts reminded others of her true gender. Why don't you cover it up? Leon had to look away in embarrassment. It would be okay if I didn't know the other person's gender, but knowing that the person in front of me is a boy, I really can't look straight at him. I can't find any reason to be ashamed in front of Pirieno. Besides, tonight may be the last time I wear this ridiculous clothes. Corvus folded his arms and said indifferently. After speaking, the young man calmly turned around and led the way. Leon did not go with him, so Azarian followed Corvus up the stairs first. After staying in front of the guest room door for several minutes, he calculated that the two of them were almost reaching the target's room, and then he quickly followed behind. Even at night, the corridor on the second floor of the embassy is not dark. The Aedius people arranged expensive chandeliers for lighting at intervals indoors, and the candles they used emitted far brighter light than the original owners had ever seen in their memories, which was extremely luxurious. Leon walked lightly up to the second floor and hid around the corner. When he heard the sound of the door closing after Corvus and Azarian entered the target room, he ducked out. Go to the target's door and place your handprints. Leon drew closer and opened his posture like a bow, aiming at the position of the head corresponding to Pirieno's height. Miss Laura, you must help me kill with 1 strike. He secretly prayed nervously to the mage lady. From the outside, only Pirieno's disgusting laughter and subtle conversations could be heard. Not knowing what was going on behind the door, Leon patiently waited for the signal from his partner to lure the enemy. Time seemed to suddenly become extremely long. Fortunately, the other slaves had already been sent away by Corvus privately in the name of Pirieno, and they were not allowed to approach. According to Corvus, most of the other Aetius mages in the embassy went to the east and entered the territory of Syrian with the army of the Cantartars. The few people who did not go to Syrian were also scattered around to carry out their missions. The night guards outside the door did not dare to enter the embassy without permission. No one here would disturb Leon's actions at this moment. Thinking that this group of Aetius people might have assisted the Cantartars in their invasion of Rolander, Leon felt that he had finally found an opportunity to help the original owner of this body avenge his old grudges. The moment he'd been waiting for finally came. He only heard behind the door, dong, bang, bang, 1 light and 2 heavy urgent knocks. Now, the fleeting opportunity did not allow for hesitation. The magic in the body immediately boiled with a stronger amplitude than the last time. Almost the same force as when it was first released. The power gathered at the gap between the fingertips, and the dazzling arrow of light spiraled and condensed into shape. Dragon, I'll eat the enemy. With a ritualistic and meaningless shout in his heart, Leon pointed his sword back and shot out the light arrow that broke through the air. Boom! The air exploded, and the candlelight in the corridor was blown out by the whistling airwaves. The trailing, dazzling tail light instantly penetrated the wooden door of the bedroom. The spiral trajectory shattered the wooden structure of the door and tore apart everything in front of it. In just a moment, Leon glimpsed Pilieno's last astonished eyes through the gap of the disintegrating wooden door, and the light curtain on his body that didn't have time to open. The moment the light arrow touched his skin, there was a crisp sound like glass breaking under the weight. Then flesh and blood burst. The rotating force drilled into Pilieno's face, lifting his head high. The magic crushed his flesh and bones, and the man's skull flew out directly. Blood and brains splashed suddenly. The remaining power of the light arrow smashed the target's head and plunged directly into the thick stone wall opposite the room in the explosion. The splashing blood almost dyed the faces of the two people next to him red. The blond boy stared at the dead man who had lost his head in a daze, and the feeling in his heart was indescribable for a while. Success, the powerful wizard who had imprisoned him for so many years, died so simply. Corvus turned his head to look at the stone wall penetrated by the light spear. However, he did not expect that the projectile magic described by Leon before would be so destructive. The light spear that completely penetrated the wall was not until it shot into the air in the courtyard, and the light track finally disappeared from the air with the wind. Before Pilieno's death, the metal magic wand that suddenly appeared on his right hand raised high had no time to work, and his body with half of his head blown off fell to the ground. Leon outside the door only felt the familiar feeling of weakness. His eyes went black, his legs weakened, and he knelt on the ground, almost falling to the ground with Pilieno's body. Leon. He heard his partner's urgent call in his ears, but he couldn't muster up the energy to respond. He realized that this time seemed to be as weak as when he first tried to release the light arrow. Did Miss Lola increase the output power for him? I'm going to faint again. I hope Azirian and Corvus can carry me. Leon's consciousness gradually blurred until the full sense of power slowly flowed from his wrist to his whole body. His spirit suddenly perked up, and he opened his eyes that were almost closed. He struggled to raise his head in surprise. The blond boy, with blood all over his face and Perino's brain and flesh hanging on his hair, was squatting in front of him. The boy touched his forehead, which was faintly showing the one-eyed magic pattern, with one hand, and held his wrist with the other hand. The warm power in his body was transmitted from Corvus's hand. Leon also noticed that the red magic pattern on the blond boy's neck faded to almost invisible and seemed to be gradually disappearing. I don't know if the spell on Ms. Elena's neck is the same. Just try it. It seems that you can also accept the chaos magic. How about it? Can you stand up? The blond boy smiled with relief, but his face was stained with blood, and his smile was really creepy. Much better. Feeling his physical strength recover, Leon held the other's wrist with his backhand and supported himself to stand up. Not only much better, his body now feels a lot lighter. Good guy, you can also charge people. Leon shook his arms and even felt that Miss Lola could help him with another shot at this moment. After all, I'm a magic slave cultivated by Pilieno for so many years. Helping him replenish his magic power in an emergency is my most basic value. After dispelling the one-eyed magic pattern on his forehead, Corvus nodded thankfully. But not all spellcasters can draw power from the spiritual world. It's okay as long as you can bear it. Azirian saw that his partner had recovered, so he was relieved. He pulled the cloak he had just taken off, wiped the blood on his face, and urged the two of them. Let's go quickly. I still have something to do. You take Elena and the others to the city wall to wait for me. Okay. Azirian looked down at his embarrassing outfit and had no time to change clothes. He had to wrap his body with the cloak again, walked away quickly, and went downstairs to find Elena and other female slaves who were now free from their restraints. Corvus turned around and walked to the side and flipped over a chair. He shook his fingers to cast a spell and used magic to tear off a chair leg. Raising his hand, the boy turned the sharp end of the wooden chair leg and came to the corpse of Pilieno. Controlling the floating wooden cone in front of him, Corvus stabbed it into the chest of the corpse. The sound of flesh and blood twisting came. After repeatedly crushing and destroying, the boy dispersed the object manipulation spell after confirming that he had completely destroyed the opponent's heart and other magical organs. Do I need to be so cautious? Leon watched Corvus's finishing blow to the corpse from the side, a little surprised. Well, I destroyed all his organs, so even if I want to summon spirits, it will be impossible. The safest way is to set fire to his body, but that will attract guards, so let's do it for now. Corvus replied, That's right, there are still undead in this world after all. Leon thought, and looked at the metal staff held in the corpse's hand. To be honest, he didn't leave because he wanted to touch the corpse. The wand was ornately carved with open wings on the top, and a huge red crystal inlaid in the wings. It must be a valuable treasure. In line with the principle that a thief should not leave empty-handed, Leon asked the boy who was about to leave the room, Are you not going to take his wand? Corvus stretched out his hand to stop Leon. It's best not to touch Pilieno's belongings. Who knows if this guy has set traps on it before he died? Hearing this warning, Leon regretfully withdrew his hand. I thought I could get the equipment of this old bitch. Don't worry. There are things more valuable than that. I have already prepared the items I should take with me when I escape. You can help me get them. Corvus dragged Leon out of the bedroom quickly. Following the blonde boy, the two ran to a room not far from Pilieno's bedroom. Leon saw Corvus draw a few marks in front of the door, and the door flickered as if some restrictions were lifted, and then it was pushed open. As you step into it, you can see a dazzling array of strange objects, various bottles and jars, exquisite instruments, and shelves full of unknown materials and decorations. This may be a wizard's workshop. While Corvus picked up the towel on the table to wipe the bloodstains on his head, he picked up something from the table and threw it to Leon at the door. Catch it. Leon stretched out his hand and caught it. After a closer look, it turned out to be an egg. In his hand was a large, hard egg about the size of an ostrich egg, and the surface was wrapped with a circle of golden rays patterns that were not sure whether they were sticky or inlaid. You can't touch the staff, but I'll give you this griffin egg. This is probably the most valuable thing here. As Corvus said, he kept his hands and feet and took out the bag he had prepared in advance from the cabinet and tied a light sword engraved with runes to his waist with a belt. Griffin eggs. 2 months ago, that guy and several mages cooperated to hunt a nest of griffins. This is the harvest given to Pilieno. I have been keeping this thing in my care, and it has not been tampered with. Corvus explained, put on a not-so-big package, and left the workshop with Leon, going downstairs and rushing out the courtyard. Leon ran after him, looking down and turning the treasure in his hand. 2 months ago. Griffin eggs. Mage Aetius. What a coincidence. The more he thought about it, the more frightened he became. Could this thing in his hand be the child of the Deathclaw brother? Without waiting to think further, the two of them ran to the wall where the warning magic failed. Azirian had already pulled Ms. Elena to wait here. Corvus. I just stayed in the room for a while. I couldn't find Martha and the others when I went out. Did you see where they went? Elena saw the blonde boy and asked him anxiously. They're not in the room? Didn't I tell them to wait in the room tonight? Corvus could not help but frown. Originally, if Pilieno was killed successfully and the blood oath curse was no longer restrained, Elena should have informed those people to escape together. Elena and I looked around and found no trace of other slaves. Azirian said helplessly. The female slaves who were supposed to be rescued were all gone, but they didn't have time to delay looking for them. Several people comforted Elena, who was worried. Fortunately, this lady was not a person who didn't know the priorities. Now was a critical moment related to everyone's life and death, so she had to suppress her worries about those people again. Corvus cast a spell, and manipulated the rope to loop around the battlements on the top of the wall, so that everyone was able to climb up the wall one by one. The night was dark, but the blond boy was well prepared. He drew out the rune sword on his waist as a medium for casting spells, and bright fluorescence immediately appeared on the blade. Leaning out of the outer wall, he waved his hand to control the sword to fall, illuminating the escape's secret passage below. With the illumination of this light, several people once again used the ropes and the footholds on the outer wall to slowly land on the small plank road on the edge of the cliff. Holding hands and moving close to the rock wall, the four people finally disappeared in the vast night. It was not long after several people left along the winding cliff plank road. An inconspicuous boat slowly sailed out from the hidden sea cave under the cliff facing the sea in the north. The poet lying on the bow of the boat, his fingertips touched the feather hat covering his face. He turned his head and looked into the depths of the night with interest. That gaze seemed to be able to penetrate the darkness and peek into the shallows behind the reefs in the distance. I always help others to take the blame. This time, someone helps me to take the blame. It's great. Hearing this, Larian, who was paddling at the stern, couldn't help but look up. The young knight, with a long sword on his waist, looked at the poet at the bow with a lantern hanging on the mast, and then looked at the beautiful girls crowded together in the cabin with a confused look. It was obvious that they were also curled up and at a loss. Larian swore that he only recognized his beloved Miss Margarina. As for the other ladies, I really don't know where the kind poet brought them from. Cheer up, Larian. Saving a lady in distress is not the most glorious act of a night, and you don't feel happy to be surrounded by so many beautiful girls? The bard turned around and teased in an indecent manner. Larian didn't dare to nod for this. He looked at his lover's unkind look with his cute eyes narrowed, so he had to shake his head to show his loyalty and sneer at his lover. Martial law, blockade, closed city gates. Teams of cavalry were ordered to rush through the various passes of the western port, and all the ships that were about to sail or had just sailed on the dock were stopped. The wanted order describing the facial features of the sons of Dosin was sent to the nearby counties by the cavalry. And the castle on the cliff was also in chaos. Countless dignitaries of Canadar were now unceremoniously ordered to stay in their rooms and were not allowed to leave. The wedding had just ended. The bride disappeared strangely. This was a loud slap in the face of the Falcon family. But at this moment, the angry accusations of the Saline family, who had married into the family at the steps of the hall, were not the most troublesome problem for Earl Falcon on the throne. Boom! The closed door was slammed open by a huge force. The two cloaked knights who were originally guarding the door fell in backwards. The tall figure covered in armor fell to the ground with a clang and rolled over, and then they got up again with their swords in their hands. A black-robed wizard with an angry face stepped into the hall with a wand, and the black-armored soldiers behind him followed closely and filed in aggressively, guarding beside the wizard. The Aetius people did not take this area that symbolized the authority of the Lord seriously at all. The guards beside the throne pressed the hilt of the sword, and the blade had already been pushed out a little, looking at the foreign wizards and soldiers who didn't know how to live or die with murderous eyes. Count Firkin raised his hand and waved to the captain of the guards beside him. Although he was dissatisfied with these arrogant Aetius people trampling on his authority, the count knew that he was wrong to the gold owner at this time. After all, Master Perino did die in his own castle, and his death was so miserable. What? With such a big commotion, are you preparing to go to war with Westport? Count Firkin held his chin and glanced at the wizards below. Master Aemon, I usually give you too much respect that you dare to be so presumptuous in front of me now. My lord, I need an explanation. Aemon grabbed his wand and gritted his teeth and said angrily. The guard said that the last person to enter the embassy yesterday was a young Canadar noble with his entourage. I want to thoroughly investigate the guests you invited. Count Firkin had a worse headache after hearing this. What the other party said was true. The biggest suspect might indeed be a noble who visited the castle. He had already sealed off the castle and checked all the visitors. As a result, the Earl naturally knew who disappeared in this sudden chaos. Don't bother my other guests. The people that Master Pilieno contacted during his lifetime and their followers have long disappeared. They may not only be the murderers of your mentor, but also shamelessly stole my son's bride." Earl Falcon's eyes were filled with anger, recalling the son of Dosen, whom he had met once. Of course, now it seems that there's a question mark whether the young man is the son of Baron Lettingberg. Earl Falcon finally sent away the angry master Aetius after promising to issue a wanted order to the lords of nearby counties and immediately send troops to check the important roads along the way. Eamon returned to the empty embassy with an expressionless face. After calming down, he came to the mentor's room again. The miserable body of the loved one has been buried. Eamon endured the grief and observed the clues around him. The shredded door panel and the hole that penetrated the stone wall opposite. Although the traces of destruction were very shocking to ordinary people, Eamon knew that the mentor could still deal with this level of attack under normal circumstances. This was obviously a sneak attack while the mentor was removing the protective spell. And from the fact that the wand in the body's hand did not even have time to activate the preset spell, the murderer must know the teacher's preferences and relaxation habits as well as himself. Although all the slaves were missing, those female slaves had no way of knowing the magic on the mentor. They would not dare to attack the mentor at the risk of triggering the blood oath. There was only one slave who knew how to remove the spell. "Corvus, I knew it would be you." He spat out the name with a resentful tone. Eamon knew that even if the damn little magic slave was not the one who did it, he must be an accomplice. No, whether he was an accomplice or not, he had to die now. The black-robed wizard closed his eyes, held the staff in front of him, and silently recited the tracking spell. Casting the spell summoned the backup that he had prepared for many years. After a long time, Amon opened his eyes again. He walked quickly to the window, took out the whistle, and blew a sharp sound. The hippogriff in the courtyard, hearing the master's call, immediately flapped its wings and flew into the air. Jumping directly onto the back of the hippogriff from the window, Amon rode his mount to the top of the Legion soldiers. "Go tell Earl Falcon to let his men chase in the north." After giving the order, Amon urged the hippogriff to rise and soar in the direction of magic. Along the wilderness path to the north, the three leading noble war horses slowly stopped their hooves by the stream. Although their abundant physical strength was far from being completely exhausted at this moment. But the tired Leon and others had to temporarily slow down their pace of escape. The reason was simple. The other two horses carrying Corvus and Elena were almost unable to hold on. The two horses they were riding were bought by Lohak at a high price in Western Port yesterday afternoon. But the good horse Uriah, found temporarily in the market, could not keep up with the extraordinary pace of the three noble war horses. As for the ordinary pack horse that was the first to carry the luggage, it collapsed on the road due to exhaustion shortly after embarking on the escape. Leon and others had to pick up the important items and gave up most of the travel equipment and the pack horse that was almost dying of exhaustion. Taking advantage of the short rest time, Corvus and Azirian finally had the opportunity to dismount and take off the dancer's tool on their bodies. Leon also put on his Witcher-like mixed armor again. And because Lohak was reluctant to throw away Leon's noble snake helmet armor yesterday, and in order to prepare for the battle, he simply put it on himself before meeting him last night. This also freed up an extra set of armor for Corvus now. Even though Lohak's leather chain composite mixed armor was a bit too loose on the blonde boy because of the difference in their body shapes, it was better to have some protection than nothing. "You are not from Aetius?" Leon asked the blonde boy by the river in surprise after finishing his armor. "Before I was 10 years old, I could still be called a Valanian." Of course, that kingdom had long been completely conquered by Aetius, and this name is no longer meaningful. While answering, Corvus led the tired horse to the shallow stream and let it lie down and wet its limbs. A rising empire? Also letting the war horse wade into the shallow stream to cool down and rest, Leon continued to ask Corvus, "Is the Aetius Empire very powerful?" The blond boy looked back. His eyes flickered, as if he had 1,000 words to say, but in the end he could only move his lips slightly. very strong to the point of despair. Corvus lowered his head and squatted, holding water and wiping the horse's body with the stream. My hometown, Valania, is not much smaller than the kingdom of Canadar, but the Empire only used 1 legion to conquer it. And there are 10 legions like that in the Empire. Leon was surprised when he heard this. Then how big is the scale of each of these so-called legions? He listened. Aetius seemed to have a complete and mature standing army. I can only speculate that a legion may have about 20,000 troops, but I don't know the details. After all, as a slave, no one will allow me to inquire about the composition of their army. Corvus thought and recalled. Anyway, in my impression, the soldiers of the Empire are always black and dense, as if they are endless. So at least 200,000 standing troops. Leon felt a headache. He was not completely ignorant of the cost of maintaining an army. If this number was true, it meant that the national strength of the Aetius people was even more amazing than he expected. Seeing the worry on Leon's face, Corvus couldn't help but smile. Don't worry. Even the Empire would not risk overturning, crossing the dangerous and vast ocean, and wasting resources to send the entire army to this land. You are very lucky that you are not adjacent to Aetius. There are thousands of mountains and rivers between this land and the Empire. At least you don't have to worry about facing the army of the Black Robes in your lifetime. That's good, but Aetius is indeed located in the far east of the continent. Is this world really round? Leon heard this and asked Corvus for confirmation. This friend is actually following the Aetius ship across the ocean. Your brain reacts quite quickly. Generally speaking, when you hear this, shouldn't you think that they are sailing along the edge of the continent? You know, the Canadar people never believe that the earth under their feet is a ball. Corvus raised his eyebrows and smiled. Just as the blond boy was about to continue, his face suddenly changed and he stopped talking. He stood up with a surprised expression and tried to reach his back. What's wrong? Seeing him like this, Leon thought that there was a bug in the boy's armor. So he stood up and walked up to him and asked, "Did something crawl into your back?" Corvus untied the rope buckle and tried to take off the armor he had just put on. "Please help me take a look at my back." Seeing the boy's anxious look, Leon quickly lent a hand to help him take off his armor. The people who were feeding horses and resting nearby also looked over. When the boy's wide armor belonging to Lohak was taken off, Leon immediately frowned. I saw a character on Corvus's back that looked like a branding iron mark, and it was faintly glowing. Did you see anything? Tell me quickly. Corvus couldn't see what was behind him, so he had to ask anxiously. It seems to be a glowing rune. Leon drew the glowing character on the other's back on the ground. The blond boy stared at the words Leon had copied on the mud and fell silent. What's going on? Leon said with some concern. Are you okay? Could that Pilieno know the death language? Did he leave other curses on you? No, well, it's okay. It's just a mark of a past spell, a false alarm. Corvus looked at the worry on the other's face and had to smile and shake his head. Let's get on the road as soon as possible. Leon was relieved when he saw that the boy's expression had returned to calm. After helping Corvus put on his armor again, everyone waited for the 2 tired horses to lower their body temperature, eat and drink enough, and then headed northeast again. This time everyone just urged the horses to jog, not running like they did last night. First, Corvus and Elena's horses were not strong enough. Second, after running at full speed last night, they were already quite far away from the western port at this moment, and it was impossible for Falcon's people to catch up and find them in a short time. However, just when they reached a fork in the road, Corvus stopped his horse and fell behind the team. Leon and others looked back in confusion. Everyone, thank you for helping me regain my freedom, but I have urgent matters to deal with now, so we can only go our separate ways. Without waiting for a reply, the blond boy pulled the reins and rode on the other side of the road, heading west. Aren't you going to Orland with us? Lohak looked at Corvus, feeling sorry. He wanted to thank this brother who had been taking care of his sister in the embassy after he returned. Corvus raised his hand and waved to everyone to say goodbye. If I have the opportunity to go to the Northern Kingdom in the future, I will definitely visit you in Cassos County. So goodbye. After saying that, the boy squeezed the horse's belly and urged the horse to speed up eagerly. Leon looked at his departing back and couldn't help feeling a little regretful. After a brief contact and understanding, this young man from the East Continent was gentle, knowledgeable, and knew a lot about the East Continent and the Asian people. If I could talk for a while longer, I would have gained more. Unfortunately, everyone has their own way to go. Let's go, hurry up. Leon quickened the pace of the warhorse. Everyone continued to move forward. But as they walked, Leon sat on the horse and thought about it, and gradually came to his senses. Something is wrong. When they set out, they had already told Corvus where the destination of their escape was. I also invited him to stay in Selva. At that time, the young man also readily agreed. Didn't see him say that he had something to deal with halfway. Moreover, he was a slave who had been imprisoned by Piliena before. Even if he had a little freedom of movement, he would not be able to run to a place so far away from the western port on weekdays. Now that he has regained his freedom, what else can he do urgently if he doesn't flee from Canadar, which has close ties with the Asian people? The glowing rune he saw just now flashed through his mind. Leon's imagination could not be stopped, and he could not help but connect the rune with Corvus's sudden change of attitude. What about the thing on his back? This kid, can it be true? Corvus flicked the reins, urging the tired horse under his crotch to run faster and faster. His eyes kept sweeping over the surrounding environment, selecting the terrain suitable for the position. Until he passed the rugged hills and rocks, a dense forest appeared in front of him. Slowly stopping his mount, the boy turned over and dismounted, grabbed the bag on the horse's back, and ran quickly into the forest. Explosion. Explosion shock. Thinking about how to set up a trap, Corvus quickly searched among a pile of crystals and bottles and jars in the bag. After selecting the materials, the boy took out the shovel beside his bag and started digging a hole under the tree roots. Before he had dug a few shovels, he heard the terrifying sound of horse hooves hitting the ground from outside the forest. So fast, the boy looked back with an incredible expression.